The first rays of sunlight slip quietly over the hills surrounding Rome. A faint glow touches the rooftops, gilding the city with a warm shimmer that makes even the plainest stone shimmer as if kissed by gold. The Tiber River, winding its steady way through the city, reflects the morning light like a ribbon of liquid bronze. In this hushed hour, before the full chorus of the city awakens, Rome seems to exhale gently, resting in its own magnificence. The eternal city is never truly silent, but at dawn, it is calm enough to notice the softer rhythms of life. A baker in a humble insula sets kindling beneath his clay oven, the smell of wood smoke drifting through the air. Soon, the fragrance of fresh bread will mingle with the morning breeze, greeting passers-by as they start their day. Water carriers fill their jars at the fountains, fed by Rome's aqueducts, the steady splash of water echoing against stone basins. A vendor arranges his baskets of figs and olives, quietly humming to himself as he prepares for the lively trade ahead. Even at this gentle hour, the city's grandeur is impossible to ignore. Rising proudly against the skyline, the Colosseum waits in solemn silence. Its arches, still and empty now, will later resound with the roar of thousands of voices, eager for spectacle. The Pantheon, with its mighty dome, seems to gaze calmly at the heavens, its oculus inviting in the morning light. The Forum Romanum rests in the stillness of the early day, its columns and statues catching the golden glow, ready to host the ceaseless debates, bargains, and ceremonies of Rome's busy life. As the sun climbs higher, the streets begin to stir. A patrician family in their spacious villa opens the shutters, allowing the light to fall on elaborate mosaics that depict myths of gods and heroes. The head of the household, a senator perhaps, walks slowly through his garden colonnade. The dew rests lightly on the leaves of laurel and olive trees, while fountains gurgle softly in the background. He pauses to sip watered wine, contemplating the duties that await him in the Senate House, where voices will rise in discussion of law, war, and the affairs of empire. In sharp contrast, the crowded insulae, the apartment blocks that house much of the city's population, echo with a different kind of life. Children run through the narrow corridors, their laughter bouncing off the plastered walls. Housewives sweep the thresholds, their brooms stirring up little clouds of dust. Craftsmen sling their tools over their shoulders and descend into the streets, ready to carve, forge, or weave their way through another day of work. Life here is close and noisy, but it is also warm, filled with the hum of community. And moving silently among them are the countless slaves who keep the city in motion. Some carry water, some prepare meals, some tend to children who are not their own. For them, dawn is not a slow awakening, but the continuation of duties that seem endless. Their presence is everywhere, and yet often unnoticed, a quiet force that upholds the daily life of Rome. The streets of the Eternal City begin to fill more quickly now. Carts creak under the weight of goods brought from the countryside. Grain, wine, oil, and produce destined for the markets. Merchants call out as they set up stalls, their voices rising to compete with one another in the crowded squares. The air fills with the aroma of bread, herbs, roasted nuts, and pungent fish sauce. The clatter of wagon wheels on cobblestones grows steadier, blending with the rhythmic footfalls of soldiers marching toward their posts. Yet, for all the bustle, Rome offers its people places of quiet. Within the sprawling city, gardens bloom with roses and lilies. Public baths begin to open their doors, inviting citizens to wash away the dust of travel or labor. The faint trickle of fountains and the calm surfaces of pools provide a sense of balance, a gentle reminder that even in the heart of the empire, life is more than duty and struggle. It is also rest and reflection. As the day grows brighter, temples awaken to their rituals. Priests make offerings at altars, lifting prayers to Jupiter, Juno, and Mars. Incense curls upward into the sky, carrying with it the devotion of the city. Worshippers arrive to leave tokens of gratitude, or petitions for health, prosperity, and protection. The rhythm of Roman religion flows naturally into the rhythm of Roman life, a bond between the mortal and the divine that is woven into every dawn. The grandeur of Rome at this moment is more than its monuments and politics. It is found in the small details. The mother braiding her daughter's hair before sending her to school. The farmer leading his donkey into the market. The senator reviewing scrolls of legislation by lamplight. The child chasing pigeons across a courtyard. Each thread, humble or noble, weaves into the greater tapestry of the city. Rome is alive. Alive in its whispers, its footsteps, its scents and sounds. Alive in its contrasts, where marble columns rise beside crowded tenements, and fountains splash while soldiers sharpen their swords. Alive in the shared pulse of millions of souls who call it home, each beginning their day beneath the same rising sun. And so, the eternal city greets the dawn. From the humblest baker to the loftiest patrician, from the quiet slave to the boisterous market seller, Rome awakens together, each life a part of the empire's rhythm. The sun climbs steadily higher, spreading its warmth over streets and courtyards, over domes and amphitheaters, until the whole city shines with the glow of a new day. This is Rome at its peak. Not only the seat of emperors and generals, but the living, breathing home of countless ordinary people. A place where greatness and simplicity meet, where triumph and toil share the same streets. The eternal city, in its quiet dawn, holds within it the essence of the Roman Empire itself, vast, powerful, yet deeply human. As we walk with the rising sun through these ancient streets, we begin our journey into the life of Rome. With each chapter, we will pause to observe the details, the people, the customs, the struggles, and the joys that made this empire one of the most enduring in history. For now, let us linger in this gentle hour, savoring the calm before the day's fullness, as the eternal city stands at the threshold of another day in its timeless story. As the sun rises higher over Rome, its golden light spreads across rooftops, courtyards, and streets. Amid the bustling insulae where plebeians awaken to their day, there also stand the grand homes of the patrician elite. These villas, adorned with marble, fresco, and mosaic, represent not just wealth, but a way of life that shaped the political and cultural heartbeat of the Roman Empire. To step inside such a residence is to step into a world of order, ritual, and luxury, yet also one of responsibility and expectation. The villa announces its presence even from the street. Its outer walls, plain and solid, give little away. Roman patricians prized privacy, and the grandeur was reserved for those allowed inside. Passing through the main doorway, one enters the atrium, the central hall of the Roman home. Here, the air is cool and open, with light streaming down through the compluvium, a rectangular opening in the roof. Beneath it lies the impluvium, a shallow pool designed to collect rainwater. The sound of trickling water greets every visitor, a soothing reminder of both nature and design. In this space, the family's ancestry is displayed with care. Wax masks of forebears line the walls, silent witnesses to the household's legacy. Guests, clients, and political allies who enter are reminded at once of the villa's history and the honor of its name. The atrium is not merely an architectural feature, it is a symbol of continuity, dignity, and reputation. Beyond the atrium lies the tablinum, the master's office. Here, scrolls are stacked neatly on shelves, recording legal matters, property deeds, and correspondence. A patrician's day is often filled with duties, meetings with clients, consultations with fellow senators, and discussions with scribes. In this room, decisions are made that ripple far beyond the villa's walls, influencing the politics of Rome itself. But the villa is not all business. Its spaces unfold into areas of beauty and repose. To one side, richly decorated dining rooms, the triclinia, are prepared for feasts. Reclining couches line the walls, ready to welcome guests for long hours of conversation, laughter, and carefully staged entertainment. On the plastered walls, colorful frescoes depict scenes from mythology: Venus rising from the sea, Hercules completing his labors, Apollo strumming his lyre. Each painting is not only art but a message, a reminder of Rome's cultural inheritance and the household's refinement. Walking further, one reaches the villa's heart, the peristyle garden. Here, the world slows down. Columns surround an open courtyard, filled with greenery and flowers. Roses bloom in carefully arranged beds, while fountains murmur softly at the center. Laurel, ivy, and olive trees offer shade, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Birds flit among branches, their songs mingling with the faint splash of water. Slaves tend to the plants quietly, trimming, watering, and arranging with care. This is a place for reflection, for leisurely walks, for conversation away from the noise of the city. The villa also provides comfort in its private quarters. Bedrooms, though modest in size, are decorated with colorful frescoes and mosaic floors. Lamps hang from bronze holders, casting warm glows at night. Storage chests hold garments of linen and wool, dyed in shades from plain white to deep crimson, depending on the wealth and taste of the family. In the kitchen, servants prepare meals over clay stoves. The aromas of bread, olives, cheeses, and stews drift into the air. For wealthy patricians, meals are not only nourishment but performance. Ingredients arrive from across the empire: figs from the east, oysters from the coast, spices from Africa, wine from distant vineyards. A dinner might stretch into hours, with courses arriving in careful sequence, each dish a display of abundance and taste. Guests recline on couches, sipping wine mixed with honey, while musicians play softly and poets recite verses to the delight of the gathering. The villa is also a place of education. Children of patrician families learn their letters in the company of tutors, often Greek slaves or freedmen who bring with them knowledge of philosophy, rhetoric, and literature. In shaded corners of the peristyle, boys copy lines from Virgil or Cicero onto wax tablets, their styluses scratching rhythmically. Girls, though less formally schooled, may still learn to read, to write, and to manage a household. Knowledge, like wealth, is a mark of status in Roman society, and no patrician household neglects it. Yet for all its beauty, the villa is not without weight. The patrician family carries responsibilities that reach beyond their walls. The master must maintain his dignity, offering protection and favors to his clients, those of lower rank who rely on his patronage. He must attend the Senate, contribute to public works, and host gatherings that reinforce social bonds. His wife, though formally excluded from politics, manages the household with quiet authority, overseeing slaves, finances, and the education of children. Together, they embody the Roman ideal of gravitas, seriousness, dignity, and responsibility. In the quiet of the evening, the villa softens once again. Lamps flicker along corridors, casting gentle light on mosaics and frescoes. The day's duties wind down, and the sounds of the city grow distant. In the peristyle, shadows lengthen across the garden paths. The fountains continue their soft murmur, a lullaby of water and stone. Within these walls, the family finds rest, surrounded by the symbols of their heritage and the comforts of their wealth. The patrician villa, in all its elegance, is more than a home. It is a stage upon which daily life, duty, and luxury unfold. It is a sanctuary of beauty and order, carefully crafted to reflect the values of Rome itself. Here, one sees the empire not only in its monuments and armies, but in the quiet rhythm of family, ritual, and tradition. As we step back from the cool colonnades and shaded gardens, we carry with us an impression of Roman grandeur on a human scale. The villa reveals a world where politics and pleasure meet, where art and duty intertwine, and where the legacy of Rome is etched not only in marble temples, but in the daily life of its leading citizens. Beyond the high walls and shaded gardens of the patrician villas lies another Rome, no less alive, no less essential to the empire's greatness. This is the Rome of the plebeians, the ordinary citizens who make up the backbone of the city. Their lives are simpler, their surroundings humbler. Yet within their daily rhythms lies the true heartbeat of the eternal city. To follow the path of a plebeian through an ordinary day is to glimpse the world, not of marble grandeur, but of bustling streets, crowded homes, and steady labor. The day begins early in the insulae, the tall apartment buildings that dominate Rome's skyline. These structures, sometimes rising 6 or 7 stories, are home to much of the city's population. Built quickly and often cheaply, they creak and groan under the weight of so many families. Fires and collapses are not uncommon, but the insulae remain the only option for the vast majority of citizens. A plebeian household awakens to the sound of neighbors stirring all around. From the upper floors, families descend narrow staircases, careful on the worn stone steps. In the lower levels, slightly larger apartments offer more space, while the highest floors, cheaper and riskier, house those with the fewest means. Children laugh as they hurry to fetch water from nearby fountains, carrying clay jars that seem nearly too heavy for their small arms. Mothers sweep thresholds, calling out greetings to friends across the corridor. The insula, crowded though it may be, is alive with a sense of community. A typical plebeian breakfast is simple. Bread dipped in olive oil, perhaps a few figs if fortune allows, and a sip of watered wine. Meals are not elaborate affairs, but brief moments of nourishment before the demands of the day. Men gather their tools, hammers, chisels, or baskets of wares, while women prepare to visit the markets or tend to children. The air is filled with voices, laughter, and the sounds of the city awakening. From the insula, the plebeian steps into the streets. Here, the energy of Rome pulses most strongly. Vendors cry out their prices. The clatter of hooves and wagon wheels echoes against stone walls, and the smell of baking bread mingles with smoke, spices, and the less pleasant odors of the crowded metropolis. For a plebeian tradesman, the day is defined by labor. Carpenters shape wood into furniture or tools. Blacksmiths hammer metal into weapons, chains, or household goods. Potters mold clay on spinning wheels, their hands moving with practiced ease. Farmers from the countryside bring their produce into the city, laying out baskets of vegetables, herbs, and grain in the bustling marketplaces. The Forum Romanum, while a place of politics and grand debate for patricians, is also a place of business for plebeians. Stalls line the edges, selling cloth, pottery, and spices. Plebeians haggle, bargain, and exchange goods, their voices mingling in a constant hum. Here, news spreads as quickly as coin changes hands. Rumors of distant battles, decrees from the Senate, or gossip from the neighborhoods ripple through the crowd, carried by word of mouth as swiftly as any messenger. For many plebeians, work is steady but not secure. Wages fluctuate, opportunities rise and fall, and survival requires resilience. Yet even amid hardship, there is pride in their labor. Each craftsman, farmer, and trader contributes to the great machine of Rome, their efforts building the wealth and stability upon which the empire depends. At midday, the city slows. The sun, climbing high, presses its heat upon the stone streets. Many plebeians take a brief pause for a modest meal: coarse bread, cheese, olives, and perhaps a bit of dried meat. Some find shade near fountains or in courtyards, while others retreat briefly to their insula. Children play in alleyways, tossing balls or spinning hoops, their laughter carrying through the warm air. Life, though simple, carries moments of joy. In the afternoon, the work resumes. Traders return to their stalls, craftsmen to their tools. Women weave cloth, grind grain, or barter for food to prepare the evening meal. Some plebeians may find employment in the service of patricians, working as clerks, servants, or laborers in grand households. Others join the endless stream of labor, required to maintain Rome itself, cleaning streets, repairing roads, carrying water, or unloading goods at the river docks. The evening brings a different rhythm. As the light softens, families gather once more. Dinner, though still humble, may be more generous than breakfast. A stew of lentils or beans, perhaps flavored with herbs, with bread to dip and wine to drink. Neighbors talk across thresholds, sharing stories of the day, exchanging laughter and complaints. The insula comes alive with chatter, its close quarters echoing with the sounds of community. Public life also offers entertainment. Plebeians may attend the games at the Colosseum, where gladiators clash and wild beasts roar. They may visit the Circus Maximus for chariot races, their cheers joining the thunder of hooves. Even the theatre offers diversions, from comedies that provoke laughter to tragedies that stir reflection. For plebeians, these spectacles provide not only excitement, but also a sense of belonging to the grandeur of Rome itself. The games remind them that they, too, are citizens of the greatest empire on earth. When night falls, lamps flicker in the windows of the insula. Smoke drifts upward from cooking fires. The city, though never fully at rest, softens its pace. Families settle into their modest rooms, children curl beneath simple blankets, and the steady hum of Rome dims into a gentle murmur. From the lofty domes of temples to the crowded tenements of the plebeians, the eternal city rests beneath the same stars. The life of a plebeian is not one of opulence, but it is one of resilience, community, and quiet dignity. Their days are filled with labor, their nights with rest and renewal. They form the foundation upon which Rome stands, not in marble monuments or golden statues, but in bread baked, roads repaired, and goods traded. In their ordinary routines lies the extraordinary truth that empires are built not only by generals and senators, but by countless unnamed citizens whose steady efforts keep the city alive. As we leave the insula and its crowded streets behind, we carry with us the rhythm of plebeian life, simple, earnest, and vital. In their world of shared burdens and shared joys, we glimpse a Rome that is human, grounded, and enduring. At the center of the eternal city lies a place unlike any other, the Forum Romanum. It is not simply a square of stone and marble, but the living heart of Rome, a space where politics, religion, commerce, and daily life intertwine. To walk through the Forum is to walk through the pulse of the empire itself, where the voices of senators mingle with the cries of merchants, and where monuments rise to remind all who enter of Rome's grandeur and destiny. As the morning sun spreads across the city, its rays fall gently on the Forum's open expanse. The air hums with movement. Merchants arrange their stalls along the edges, spreading bolts of cloth, jars of oil, baskets of fruit, and amphorae of wine. The fragrance of fresh herbs drifts through the air, blending with the earthy scent of clay and the sharper tang of bronze. Customers lean in to examine wares, their voices rising in spirited bargaining. The rhythm of trade forms the first layer of sound in the day's symphony. Yet the Forum is not merely a marketplace. It is the stage of politics. The Curia Julia, the Senate House, stands solemnly at one end, its doors, tall and austere, open to admit senators in their white togas edged with purple. Inside, debates echo against marble walls, discussions of taxes, laws, wars, and alliances. The plebeians who linger outside cannot hear the details, but they sense the weight of decisions made within, decisions that ripple outward to provinces and legions far from Rome. Close by rises the rostra, a platform adorned with the bronze prose of captured enemy ships. From here, orators address the people, their voices carrying across the square. Citizens gather in clusters to listen, nodding in agreement or muttering dissent. A skilled speaker can sway the crowd, shaping opinion with eloquence and gesture. For plebeian and patrician alike, the Forum is where words hold power, as great as legions. Temples, too, crown the Forum's edges, lending a sacred gravity to its bustle. The Temple of Saturn, its tall columns standing proudly against the sky, reminds the people of Rome's wealth, for within it lies the state treasury. The Temple of Castor and Pollux, with its graceful pillars, speaks to Rome's ties to myth and divine protection. The Temple of Vesta, small but enduring, houses the eternal flame tended by the Vestal Virgins, a symbol of Rome's unbroken spirit. To walk among these temples is to feel the presence of gods interwoven with the affairs of men. Amid the grandeur, ordinary citizens move through the square with their own purposes. Lawyers stand near the basilicas, offering their services to those in need of counsel. Scribes scratch notes onto wax tablets, recording contracts and testimonies. Farmers from the countryside lead donkeys laden with produce, weaving through the crowd with steady patience. The forum belongs not only to senators and magistrates, but also to shopkeepers, laborers, and wanderers who come seeking business, justice, or simply the thrill of being at Rome's center. By midday, the forum swells with life. Shadows shorten, and the heat of the sun presses on the paving stones. Citizens cluster beneath porticos, seeking shade as they talk politics or trade gossip. Children chase one another between columns, their laughter echoing against ancient walls. Priests in white robes carry out rituals at altars, incense rising in fragrant clouds that mingle with the dust and chatter of the square. The monuments tell stories as much as the people do. The Arch of Septimius Severus, the Column of Trajan, and other triumphal structures proclaim Rome's victories in carved reliefs. Soldiers marching through the forum glance upward, reminded that their campaigns are immortalized in stone. Foreign visitors, wide-eyed, gaze at these same carvings with awe, realizing they stand in the presence of the empire's pride. As the afternoon wanes, the forum shifts once more. The merchants begin to pack their goods, the air growing quieter as carts creak away down the stone streets. The senators retreat to their villas, the scribes tuck away their tablets, and the priests complete their final rites of the day. The golden light of evening touches the columns, turning them soft and luminous. The bustle subsides, but the square does not fall silent, it only rests, awaiting tomorrow's tide of voices. Even at night, the forum retains its solemn dignity. Lamps flicker along the porticos, their flames glowing against marble. The eternal flame of Vesta burns steadily, a quiet beacon of continuity. Travelers passing through pause in the moonlight to gaze at the temples, their outlines stark against the sky. Though the voices of the day are gone, the presence of history lingers, as if the very stones remember each speech, each bargain, each whispered prayer that has unfolded here. To stand in the Forum Romanum is to stand at the center of an empire. It is not only a place of marble and stone, but of memory and meaning. Here, politics and religion, business and daily life converge in a single space, binding citizens together in a shared rhythm of existence. The Forum is Rome distilled, a place where power is displayed, where gods are honored, and where ordinary lives unfold beneath the shadow of monuments. As we leave its wide expanse behind, the sounds of its day echo softly in memory. The cries of merchants, the cadence of orators, the murmur of citizens in conversation. The Forum Romanum is more than a square. It is the voice of Rome, speaking across centuries, steady and enduring. While the Forum Romanum embodies the public life of Rome, the household represents its private foundation. To the Romans, the family was not merely a unit of affection, but the cornerstone of society, economy, and tradition. At the center of this structure stood the paterfamilias, the father of the family, whose authority shaped the rhythm of life within the home. To understand Roman society, one must first step into the household and see how its order reflected the values of the empire itself. The Roman family begins each day with rituals that reinforce unity and tradition. At dawn, the household gods, the lares and penates, are honored with small offerings of food or incense. A few drops of wine, a bit of bread, or a pinch of salt might be placed upon the household altar. These gestures, simple though they seem, bind the family to its ancestors and to the divine forces that guard the hearth. Children watch and learn, their eyes wide with solemnity, as they absorb the rhythms of devotion that will one day become their own. In this setting, the paterfamilias holds near absolute authority, known as patria potestas. His power extends over every member of the household, his wife, children, and even slaves. In theory, he holds the right to arrange marriages, approve or deny contracts, manage property, and decide the fates of those under his roof. Few fathers exercised this authority with cruelty. Yet its presence was a constant reminder that the family was not a democracy, but a hierarchy, a reflection of Rome's broader order. The paterfamilias often begins his day reviewing the household accounts. Slaves or freedmen bring records of purchases, debts, and rents owed. In wealthier homes, estates beyond the city provide income in the form of grain, olives, or wine. Even in modest households, careful management is essential, for the family's survival depends on the steady hand of its leader. Yet the father's role is not solely financial. He is also a teacher and moral guide. Sons gather at his side to hear lessons on discipline, courage, and honor. Sometimes he recounts stories of ancestors, of grandfathers who served bravely in wars, of great uncles who held office with dignity. In these tales, children learn what it means to be Roman. Daughters, too, absorb his words. Though their paths may lead toward marriage and the management of households of their own. The materfamilias, the mother, though formally under her husband's authority, plays a vital role within the family. She oversees the running of the household, ensuring that meals are prepared, clothing is woven, and slaves or servants perform their tasks. Roman women often enjoyed more freedom than their counterparts in other ancient cultures. They could own property, inherit wealth, and even initiate divorce. Yet within the daily rhythms of the home, their work centered on maintaining order, harmony, and the well-being of children. Children in the Roman household grow up surrounded by expectation. Boys are prepared for future roles in politics, the military, or trade. Their education may begin with simple letters and numbers at home, later expanding to lessons from tutors in rhetoric, philosophy, and law. Girls, though less formally schooled, still learn literacy and practical skills, preparing them to become wives who can manage estates and households with competence. Both boys and girls are taught the Roman virtues of pietas, duty, devotion, and respect for family and gods. The household also includes slaves, whose presence is a reminder of Rome's dependence on labor beyond its citizens. Some serve as cooks, tutors, or attendants, living closely with the family. Others labor in fields or workshops owned by the paterfamilias. Their status is humble, yet within the home they are part of the extended household, bound by the same rhythms of duty and expectation. The paterfamilias has power over them as well, deciding rewards, punishments, and sometimes even the possibility of freedom. Meals in the Roman family reflect both simplicity and tradition. A modest breakfast of bread and cheese gives way to a more substantial dinner in the evening. The family reclines together, sharing stews of lentils or beans, vegetables, and perhaps fish or meat if fortune allows. Before the meal, prayers are offered to the household gods, and afterward, conversation flows. Children listen to their elders discuss politics, philosophy, or the day's events, learning not only through books, but through the living example of family life. Festivals and special occasions bring the family into closer unity. On birthdays, sacrifices may be made to the gods. During Saturnalia, roles are reversed for a time, with masters serving slaves in a gesture of festivity and equality. Weddings, funerals, and rites of passage are all marked by ceremonies that tie the household to the broader community, reinforcing bonds that stretch beyond the villa or insular walls. Despite the paterfamilias' authority, the family is not a rigid structure of command alone. Love, affection, and tenderness also flow within its walls. Mothers cradle infants, fathers praise their sons' small accomplishments, siblings laugh and quarrel as children always do. These softer moments remind us that behind the grandeur of Roman law and tradition, the family remained a deeply human institution, filled with warmth and struggle alike. As evening falls, the household gathers once more before the altar. Lamps flicker in the dim light, casting gentle shadows on walls adorned with frescoes or simple plaster. The paterfamilias leads a prayer, giving thanks for the day's blessings and asking for protection through the night. Children grow drowsy, nodding against their mother's shoulders, while servants clear the remnants of the evening meal. Slowly, the villa or insula quiets, settling into the hush of night. The Roman family, anchored by the authority of the paterfamilias, embodies the values of the empire itself: discipline, duty, and continuity. Within its walls, children learn the rhythms of devotion, mothers sustain the life of the home, and fathers guard the legacy of their ancestors. Though shaped by hierarchy and power, the family is also shaped by care, memory, and hope for the future. As we step back from the household, we glimpse how Rome sustained itself, not only through armies and laws, but through the daily lives of families. Each home, whether grand villa or modest insular apartment, is a small reflection of the greater empire, ordered, enduring, and alive with the bonds of kinship. When one thinks of the Roman Empire, the first images are often of emperors, generals, and senators, men whose names filled the pages of history. Yet within the Roman household and across society, women played vital roles. While Roman law and custom placed them under the authority of fathers and husbands, they enjoyed freedoms and opportunities that surprised many later observers. In their hands rested the management of families, estates, and even the subtle shaping of Rome's cultural life. To journey through their world is to glimpse the quieter, but enduring influence that women wove into the fabric of Roman civilization. A Roman woman's day begins with the dawn, often in the company of servants or family. The materfamilias, the mother of the household, directs the rhythm of work that sustains the home. She oversees the preparation of meals, the weaving of clothing, and the keeping of accounts. Yet her duties are not confined to domestic chores. In wealthier families, she supervises a staff of slaves and freedwomen, giving orders with authority and ensuring the smooth running of the household. In more modest homes, she works with her own hands, tending the hearth and guiding her children. What makes Roman women remarkable, compared to many of their contemporaries, is the degree of autonomy they could possess. By law, a woman was under the guardianship of her paterfamilias or her husband, but over time these controls loosened. Women could own and inherit property, manage dowries, and even conduct business. A widow might find herself mistress of vast estates, free to lease land, trade goods, or lend money at interest. Some women grew wealthy enough to sponsor buildings, temples, and public works, leaving inscriptions that honored their generosity. Marriage in Rome was both a personal union and a social contract. Weddings were marked by solemn rituals, processions, songs, and prayers to the gods. A bride, dressed in a flame-colored veil, left her father's house to join her husband's. Yet not all marriages were arranged without thought for the woman's wishes. Among the elite, alliances often served political ends, but affection and partnership could still grow. In more humble households, mutual trust and shared labor bound couples together in daily life. Though men dominated public politics, women's influence often reached behind the scenes. A skilled wife might advise her husband in decisions, whispering counsel that shaped his choices. Letters from the period show husbands asking for their wives' opinions or praising their judgment. Mothers guided the education of their children, especially in early years, instilling values of duty, modesty, and faith. Even in a world where men spoke in the forum, women's voices shaped the household, the true training ground of future citizens. The freedoms of Roman women extended beyond the walls of home. They walked the markets, purchased goods, and visited temples. They attended the theater and games, seated alongside their families. Wealthier women might ride in litters through the crowded streets, shaded from the sun by attendants. Others strolled more modestly, mingling with the bustle of vendors, musicians, and neighbors. The public life of Rome, though centered on men, was never devoid of women's presence. Education for women varied by family. Many learned to read and write, particularly those of the upper classes. Inscriptions, letters, and poetry written by women show literacy was not uncommon. Some became poets themselves, composing verses admired in their time. Others studied philosophy, music, or medicine. Though barred from holding office or pleading in courts, educated women still enriched the intellectual life of Rome, conversing with thinkers and preserving culture through their families. Roman religion also gave women an active role. Priestesses such as the Vestal Virgins guarded the sacred flame of Vesta, ensuring the safety of the city itself. Chosen as young girls, they served for decades, bound by vows of chastity and reverence. Their position was one of great honor, granting them privileges unknown to other women's, seats of distinction at games, the power to pardon condemned prisoners, and independence from male guardianship. Beyond the Vestals, countless women served in temples, prepared offerings, and led household rituals, ensuring the gods remained close to daily life. Despite these freedoms, limitations remained. Women could not vote, serve in the army, or hold public office. Their names rarely appeared in the lists of magistrates or generals. Their influence was indirect, woven through family, wealth, and culture rather than inscribed in laws or carved on monuments. Yet perhaps because of this, their contributions often endured quietly, sustaining Rome through the bonds of home and the continuity of tradition. Among the most famous Roman women were those whose stories reached beyond the private sphere. Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers, was praised for her wisdom and virtue, shaping sons who became pivotal figures in Roman politics. Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus, wielded immense influence behind the scenes, guiding her husband and securing the succession of her descendants. Agrippina the Younger, mother of Nero, navigated the dangerous currents of imperial intrigue with ambition and cunning. These figures remind us that Roman women, though formally excluded from public rule, were never absent from history's course. Life for women in less privileged ranks was simpler, but no less important. The wives of farmers rose with the sun, grinding grain and tending gardens. Craftswomen sold cloth, pottery, or foodstuffs in the markets. Freedwomen managed taverns, laundries, and bakeries, building modest but independent lives. Even slaves, though bound to their masters, formed bonds of friendship and support, carving out moments of humanity in the shadows of labor. Each contributed in her way to the beating heart of Roman life. In the evenings, families gathered, and women's presence anchored the household. They lit lamps, served meals, and shared stories. They soothed children with lullabies, taught them prayers to the household gods, and mended garments by the soft glow of oil flames. These quiet acts, repeated across centuries, sustained the rhythm of Roman civilization more surely than the victories of generals or the decrees of emperors. Thus, to speak of Roman women is to recognize both their constraints and their resilience. Within the boundaries set by custom and law, they carved spaces of freedom, influence, and dignity. They managed homes, estates, and businesses. They educated children and preserved traditions. They wove threads of continuity through an empire that often seemed restless and vast. In their strength and adaptability lay the quiet foundation upon which Rome endured. As night falls on a Roman home, the materfamilias places offerings before the household altar, whispering prayers for her family's health and fortune. Around her, children drift into sleep, her husband reflects on the day's labors, and servants finish their tasks. The household grows silent, its rhythms secure. In the stillness, we see the enduring power of Roman women. not written in triumphal arches or military parades, but etched in the daily lives of families and the unbroken thread of tradition. To understand Rome, not only as a city of senators, soldiers, and emperors but as a living civilization, one must also look at its children. For in their laughter, their studies, and their play, the empire's future was quietly prepared. Roman childhood was a blend of tenderness and discipline, of simple joys and stern expectations. In the shaded courtyards, in the bustling schools, and within the household walls, the next generation of citizens was shaped. A Roman child's journey began at birth, with rituals that bound the infant to family and to the gods. On the 8th day for girls and the 9th for boys, a ceremony called the dies lustricus was held. The child was given a name, prayers were offered, and a protective charm, known as a bulla, was hung around the neck. This amulet, often of gold for the wealthy or leather for the poor, was believed to ward off evil spirits. It remained with the child throughout youth, a constant reminder of divine guardianship. Infancy was a time of care and watchfulness. Mothers nursed their babies when possible, though wet nurses were common among wealthier families. Servants or elder siblings often helped in tending to the little ones. Toys made of clay, wood, or bone, rattles, dolls, and carved animals provided early amusement. Despite the dangers of illness, which claimed many young lives, families cherished their children, protecting them with love and prayer. As children grew, play filled their days. Boys and girls alike rolled hoops through the streets, played games of knucklebones, or raced with balls and sticks. They sang rhymes, skipped stones, and invented stories in the shade of porticos. These moments of laughter carried the same timeless joy that children everywhere have known. Yet even in play, the seeds of Roman discipline were sown. Games often imitated adult life, mock battles with wooden swords, role-playing as magistrates or priests, or tending to doll-sized households. By the age of 7, education usually began. For wealthy families, a private tutor might instruct the children within the household. Others attended small schools run by literators, teachers who guided pupils in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Lessons often took place in simple rented rooms or shaded porticos, where children sat on stools with wax tablets balanced on their knees. Using a stylus, they traced letters, copied maxims, and memorized verses. The air was filled with the soft scratch of styluses and the murmuring of recited lines. Education was highly valued by the Romans, for they believed learning instilled discipline and prepared children for their roles as citizens. Boys were trained with particular rigor, for their futures lay in politics, law, the military, or commerce. Girls, though less often sent to formal schools, were not excluded from learning. Many families taught their daughters to read and write, preparing them to manage households and estates with competence. Some women, as we have seen, became literate poets or philosophers in their own right. As children advanced, their studies grew more demanding. Grammar schools taught literature, focusing especially on the works of Greek and Roman poets. Students memorized passages from Homer, Virgil, and Horace, learning not only language but lessons of virtue and courage. Rhetoric followed, where young men practiced public speaking. Standing before classmates, they delivered arguments, defended cases, and learned the art of persuasion, skills essential in Rome's civic life. Discipline in education could be strict. Teachers were known to use rods or whips to correct inattentive pupils. Parents, too, believed firmness was necessary to instill respect and self-control. Yet alongside sternness were moments of encouragement. A boy praised for reciting well, or a girl admired for her careful stitching of letters, might glow with pride. The balance of discipline and reward prepared children for the demanding life of Roman society. Religion remained woven into childhood. Children were taught to honor the household gods, to join their parents in rituals, and to respect the sanctity of festivals. Each lesson carried a sense of pietas, the Roman virtue of duty toward family, gods, and country. As children grew, they began to participate more fully in ceremonies, marking their gradual passage into adult responsibility. Milestones marked the end of childhood. For boys, removing the bulla at around 16 symbolized the step into manhood. They exchanged the child's toga, the toga praetexta with its purple border, for the plain white toga virilis of adulthood. Surrounded by family, they processed to the forum, presented themselves before magistrates, and were formally registered as citizens. For girls, adulthood was often signaled by marriage, though some remained longer in their father's home. The transition was solemn yet celebratory, tying the individual to Rome's broader fabric. Yet not all Roman children experienced such pathways equally. Among the poor, formal schooling was often unaffordable. Children of farmers and laborers worked alongside their parents, learning trades or tending fields. Their education came from life itself, measuring grain, counting coins, or listening to village elders. Slave children lived in yet another world, bound by their masters' decisions. Some were taught skills or crafts, others endured harsh labor from a young age. Even so, friendships and small joys bloomed in every corner of childhood. Stories and myths also formed part of early learning. Roman children grew up hearing tales of Romulus and Remus, of Aeneas and the founding of Rome, of heroes who embodied courage and sacrifice. These legends, retold by parents, teachers, and storytellers, became threads woven into their identities. A boy who listened to the bravery of Horatius at the bridge might aspire to military valor. A girl who admired Lucretia's virtue might strive for dignity and honor. Through such stories, the Roman spirit was passed down. As evening fell, families gathered for the main meal. Children sat with their parents, listening as adults discussed politics, philosophy, or the day's happenings. In these moments, much was learned: how to argue politely, how to respect elders, how to carry oneself with dignity. Afterward, as lamps flickered, mothers or nurses lulled the little ones with songs, guiding them gently into sleep. The laughter of play, the sternness of lessons, and the warmth of family all blended into the dreams of youth. Roman childhood, though shaped by duty and expectation, was also filled with tenderness. It was a time of games and stories, of amulets and lessons, of gradual steps into the wide responsibilities of citizenship. In the faces of children, whether wealthy or humble, free or enslaved, the future of Rome shone brightly. For every senator, soldier, or thinker once sat with a wax tablet in hand, reciting letters by lamplight, or rolled a hoop along a sunlit street. In nurturing its children, Rome nurtured itself. And so, in the quiet of the night, when children drift into slumber, beneath the protective gaze of their household gods, we see in them both the fragility of life and the promise of endurance. Their laughter echoes across centuries, reminding us that even in an empire of power and grandeur, it was the simple joys of childhood and the shaping of young minds that carried Rome forward into history. Beneath the grandeur of Rome, the marble temples, triumphal arches, and lavish feasts, lay a world of toil. At the heart of this world was slavery, a condition so common in the Roman Empire that it touched nearly every household, workshop, and farm. Alongside the enslaved labored countless free men and women who worked as farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and laborers. Together, they formed the foundation upon which Rome's power and prosperity rested. To wander into their lives is to see the empire from another angle, not through senators' speeches or generals' conquests, but through the daily rhythm of work. Slavery in Rome was vast and varied. Prisoners of war, children born into bondage, debtors, and those sold into servitude all found themselves part of this system. Unlike in later centuries, Roman slavery was not tied to race or ethnicity. Greeks, Gauls, Africans, Syrians, and even Italians might become slaves. For some, this fate meant brutal labor. For others, it meant roles of relative comfort within households or businesses. Within the city of Rome, household slaves were perhaps the most visible. They tended to cooking, cleaning, and serving meals. Some acted as tutors, teaching the children of their masters to read and write. Others served as secretaries, accountants, or even doctors, managing affairs with a skill that earned them trust and responsibility. The life of such slaves, though still bound by dependence, could be gentler than that of those in harsher conditions. In the countryside, the picture grew grimmer. Slaves labored on vast estates called latifundia, working fields of grain, olive groves, and vineyards. From dawn until dusk, they toiled under the supervision of overseers. The work was relentless, and conditions were harsh. In quarries and mines, slaves endured even greater suffering, cutting stone or extracting precious metals deep underground. These places were feared above all, for life there was often short and filled with hardship. Yet slavery was not always a lifelong sentence. Roman custom allowed for manumission, the granting of freedom. A master might free a trusted slave for years of loyal service, or a slave might purchase freedom with savings accumulated through small earnings. Freedmen and freedwomen became part of Roman society, carrying the status of former slaves but able to own property, marry, and pass wealth to their children. Many freedmen remained tied to their former masters as clients, but freedom gave them dignity and opportunity. Alongside slaves, free laborers filled the streets and fields of Rome. Farmers formed the backbone of society, cultivating wheat, barley, grapes, and olives. Some owned modest plots, while others rented land or worked as seasonal hands. In villages and towns, craftsmen plied their trade as blacksmiths shaping tools and weapons, potters molding clay into jars, weavers producing cloth, and carpenters raising beams for houses and ships. Their skills supported daily life, from the smallest home to the grandest palace. In the city, labor took many forms. Dock workers unloaded grain ships at Ostia, hauling sacks under the Mediterranean sun. Builders raised scaffolds along the city's monuments, their hammers ringing through the air. Bakers filled streets with the aroma of bread, grinding grain in noisy mills, powered by slaves or donkeys. Tavern keepers served meals of beans, bread, and wine to workers at the end of long days. Each occupation, humble though it might seem, was essential to sustaining Rome's vast and restless population. Markets buzzed with the activity of traders and artisans. Merchants displayed spices from the east, glass from Alexandria, and wool from Gaul. Women sold baskets of figs and dates, their voices rising above the din. Children carried water jugs or swept stalls clean. Amid this bustle, daily laborers sought work, offering their strength for tasks as varied as carrying loads, cleaning sewers, or serving as porters in wealthy households. These men and women lived day to day, their wages modest but vital. The relationship between slaves, laborers, and the elite was complex. The wealthy depended on their toil, but often remained distant from their struggles. At times, fear of unrest stirred the Senate, for slave revolts did erupt. The most famous was led by Spartacus, a gladiator who, in the 1st century BCE, gathered thousands of slaves into rebellion. Though ultimately crushed, his uprising revealed the deep tensions within Rome's reliance on servitude. Yet even in hardship, moments of humanity appeared. Slaves formed friendships, shared songs, and whispered stories of hope. Free laborers gathered in taverns, laughing over cups of wine after long days. Festivals offered respite, when even the most humble could join in games, dances, and feasts. In these brief interludes, the burdens of labor were lightened, and the bonds of community reminded them of shared endurance. Religion also offered solace. Slaves prayed to household gods alongside their masters, or to deities of their homelands. Laborers left offerings at roadside shrines, asking for strength in their work. In these quiet acts of devotion, they sought meaning and comfort beyond the grind of daily toil. The diet of workers was simple but sustaining. Bread was the staple, often coarse and dark. Pulse, a porridge of grains and legumes, filled many bowls. Vegetables, olives, and cheese added variety, while meat was a rare luxury. Wine, often diluted with water, was drunk daily, quenching thirst and easing fatigue. Though plain, these meals carried families through long hours of labor, nourishing body and spirit alike. As night descended, the rhythm of work gave way to rest. Lamps flickered in workshops as tools were set aside. Farmers returned from fields, their bodies weary but their hearts steady. Slaves finished tasks, some retreating to cramped quarters, others sleeping where they worked. The city's noise softened, replaced by the distant murmur of voices and the occasional bark of a dog. Sleep came as a gentle reprieve, preparing all for the labors of another day. Slavery and daily labor may not shine in marble or echo in the speeches of senators, yet they sustained the empire. Without them, Rome's grandeur would crumble, its armies starve, and its temples lie unfinished. Their work was the unseen strength of the empire, humble but enduring. In their resilience and perseverance lay the true heartbeat of Rome. And so, when we look beyond the triumphal arches and gilded halls, we find the quiet dignity of labor. In the sweat of workers, in the songs of slaves, and in the weary rest at day's end, the empire lived. Their lives, though marked by hardship, carried the weight of Rome upon their shoulders. Day after day, century after century. To understand Rome at its peak is to understand its food. Meals were not merely a matter of sustenance, but a reflection of status, culture, and community. The empire's kitchens, from the humblest street stalls to the grandest banquets, echoed with the clatter of utensils, the aromas of roasting meat, and the hum of conversation. Through food, the Romans displayed wealth, honored gods, and bound families together in shared ritual. At the simplest level, the diet of the Roman people rested upon three pillars: grain, olives, and wine. Grain was life itself, forming the staple bread and porridge that sustained rich and poor alike. Olives, pressed into oil, flavored food, lit lamps, and even anointed bodies in baths. Wine, diluted with water, was consumed daily and served as both nourishment and comfort. These essentials flowed into Rome from across the empire: wheat from Egypt, olives from Spain, and wine from Gaul. Together, they formed the steady rhythm of the Roman table. For the ordinary citizen, meals were modest yet filling. Breakfast, or intaculum, might be nothing more than bread dipped in wine, accompanied by a few olives or cheese. The midday meal, prandium, was equally simple, perhaps cold leftovers, beans, or fruits purchased from the bustling markets. The main meal, cena, taken in the late afternoon or evening, was the most substantial. For many, this meant a stew of vegetables and grains, flavored with herbs, and thick slices of coarse bread. Meat was rare, a luxury reserved for festivals or special occasions. Yet within this simplicity lay variety. Markets brimmed with produce: figs, dates, apples, and pears, lentils, chickpeas and beans, cabbages, leeks and onions. Spices arrived from far-flung provinces, their scents mingling in the stalls: coriander, cumin, and saffron. Fish, both fresh and salted, was popular along the coasts, while inland markets offered preserved meats and cheeses. Even those with little coin could savor the diversity of Rome's empire in the foods that passed through its gates. For the wealthy, however, meals transcended mere necessity. Feasts became performances of status, carefully arranged to impress guests and display abundance. In lavish villas, the triclinium, the dining room, was arranged with couches around a low table. Guests reclined on cushions, eating with their hands while slaves served dishes in endless succession. The meal began with gastatio, appetizers of eggs, olives, and shellfish, often seasoned with the ever-present fish sauce called garum. The main courses, prima mensa, showcased Rome's extravagance. Roasted boar stuffed with sausages, dormice rolled in honey and poppy seeds, peacocks with resplendent feathers, and exotic fish displayed whole, their scales shimmering in the lamplight. Sauces flavored with honey, vinegar, herbs, and spices heightened every taste. wine flowed freely, diluted but abundant, as toasts were made and conversation lingered deep into the night. Dessert, or secunda mensa, offered sweet endings, fruits glazed with honey, cakes of wheat and cheese, and nuts roasted in oil. The feast might end with music, poetry recitations, or performances by dancers. For hosts, such spectacles were not merely hospitality, but demonstrations of wealth, culture, and power. To be invited was an honor, to attend was a privilege, and to host successfully was a triumph of social standing. Yet even beyond extravagance, food in Rome held symbolic weight. Certain offerings were made to the gods. Grains cast into flames, wine poured upon altars, honeyed cakes set before household shrines. Banquets celebrated marriages, political alliances, and victories in war. Festivals brought entire communities together, with sacrifices followed by shared meals that bound neighbors in common joy. In these moments, food nourished not only the body, but the spirit of Rome itself. Among the most iconic flavors of the Roman kitchen was garum, the fermented fish sauce beloved across the empire. Produced in coastal towns, garum was made by layering fish, salt, and herbs in vats left to ferment under the sun. The liquid that drained away was prized as a seasoning, poured into stews, sprinkled over meats, and stirred into sauces. Its pungent aroma filled kitchens and markets, a scent that defined Roman cuisine. Cooking methods varied widely. Simple clay ovens and open hearths baked bread and roasted meats. Portable braziers allowed vendors to cook on the streets, selling hot snacks to passers-by. Wealthy kitchens boasted bronze cookware, skilled chefs, and elaborate tools for grinding spices and preparing sauces. Recipes preserved in texts like Apicius reveal the creativity of Roman cooks, who blended sweet and savory flavors in ways that might surprise the modern palate. Meats paired with fruit, dishes seasoned with honey and vinegar, and spices used in bold, unexpected combinations. For slaves and laborers, meals were taken quickly, often in kitchens or workshops, with little ceremony. In contrast, for the elite, dining was slow, indulgent, and filled with conversation. These differences highlighted the divides of Roman society, yet they also revealed the shared reliance on the same staples: bread, oil, and wine that united all. Public dining also had its place. Taverns dotted the streets, offering bowls of stew, cups of wine, and bread for those who could afford a simple meal away from home. For the poor, Rome's grain dole, the annona, ensured survival. Distributions of wheat, sometimes bread, were given to citizens, helping to feed the vast urban population. Without this, hunger might have threatened the stability of the city. Even the rituals of the table revealed Rome's values. Reclining at meals was a sign of freedom and status, denied to slaves but expected among citizens. Hand-washing before dining was a mark of civility, and the sharing of cups symbolized trust and camaraderie. To sit at a Roman table, whether modest or magnificent, was to participate in a tradition that blended nourishment with identity, survival with spectacle. As evening fell and lamps flickered in the dining rooms of Rome, the city's voices softened. In cramped apartments, families gathered around simple bowls of stew, breaking bread and sharing laughter. In villas, guests reclined amid music and wine, their laughter mingling with the rustle of silk and the soft footsteps of serving slaves. Across the empire, from the humblest huts to the proudest palaces, food bound people together in a rhythm as steady as the turning of the seasons. Food and feasting were, in many ways, a mirror of Rome itself, practical yet extravagant, diverse yet unified, rooted in tradition yet open to influence. Through every loaf of bread, every shared cup of wine, and every lavish banquet, the empire revealed both its wealth and its humanity. To taste Rome was to taste its history, a story told in grains and olives, in spices and honey, in the simple meals of workers, and the sumptuous feasts of emperors. Few institutions reveal the rhythms of Roman daily life as clearly as the baths. More than mere places for washing, the public baths, therma, were centers of leisure, relaxation, and community. To step inside was to enter a world of warm air, shimmering water, and quiet conversation, a retreat from the bustle of the city outside. At their height, Rome's baths embodied the empire's mastery of engineering and its devotion to communal life, offering citizens a sanctuary of both body and spirit. The practice of bathing stretched back centuries, but under the empire, it blossomed into an art form. Emperors built vast complexes, Caracalla's baths, Diocletian's baths, each larger and more magnificent than the last. These structures were not simply utilitarian. They were architectural marvels, adorned with marble, mosaics, and columns, their walls echoing with the gentle sounds of splashing water and murmured voices. To the Romans, bathing was more than cleansing. It was a statement of civilization. Visiting the baths was a daily ritual for many. Men and women typically bathed separately, though some complexes reserved different times of day for each. Entry was affordable, even for the poor, as fees were kept low or waived altogether by generous benefactors. Thus, the baths became a place where all classes mingled: the senator and the soldier, the merchant and the mason, the teacher and the student. In this space, distinction softened. Here, one was simply Roman, bound by the shared comfort of warm water and steam. A typical visit unfolded as a slow progression through rooms of varying temperature, a journey designed to refresh and rejuvenate. One entered first the aqueductorium, or changing room, where attendants watched over clothing and valuables. From there, the visitor might pass into the palastra, an open courtyard for exercise. Here, men boxed, wrestled, and threw discus, their muscles gleaming with oil under the sun. Though exercise was common, it was the bathing itself that formed the heart of the ritual. The first chamber was the tepidarium, a warm room that prepared the body for hotter environments. Its gentle heat loosened the limbs, its floors often decorated with colorful mosaics that depicted sea creatures, nymphs, or geometric designs. Conversation flowed easily here, voices hushed under the soft glow of lamplight. From the tepidarium, one entered the caldarium, the hot room, heated by furnaces beneath the floors and behind the walls. The caldarium was a chamber of intense steam, its marble benches slick with moisture, its air thick and heavy. Bathers sweated freely, their pores opening, their muscles relaxing. After enduring the heat, many sought relief in the frigidarium, the cold room. Here, a plunge pool awaited, its waters cool and bracing. To immerse oneself was to shock the senses awake, a contrast that left the body tingling and refreshed. Some lingered in the cold water, others emerged quickly, shivering but invigorated. The alternation between hot and cold was thought to promote health, strength, and vitality. Beyond the core chambers, baths often offered luxuries that elevated the experience. Perfumed oils were applied after bathing, rubbed into the skin by slaves or attendants with small scrapers called strigils. Massages soothed weary muscles, and physicians sometimes offered advice on health and diet. Libraries and lecture halls adjoined the bathing areas, inviting visitors to read, debate, or listen to philosophers. Gardens and shaded porticos provided space for quiet reflection, while vendors sold snacks, wine, and small luxuries. In this way, the baths became miniature cities within the city, hubs of culture as much as of cleansing. The engineering that made the baths possible was as remarkable as the social life they contained. Aqueducts carried fresh water from distant springs into reservoirs, feeding fountains, pools, and cisterns. Furnaces known as hypocausts circulated hot air beneath raised floors and through hollow walls, creating a consistent heat that filled the caldaria with steam. Without such ingenuity, the grandeur of the baths would have been impossible. Rome's mastery of water and heat was as vital to its civilization as its armies and laws. For many Romans, the baths were not only routine but essential. A day without bathing was seen as incomplete, almost uncivilized. Writers like Seneca described the sounds of the baths with wry detail. the slap of hands in massage, the splash of water, the cries of vendors hawking food. Yet even he, with his stoic tendencies, could not deny the bath's place at the heart of Roman life. They provided more than hygiene, they were social spaces, where friendships were forged, business conducted, and news exchanged. For women, the baths offered similar comforts, though often with greater privacy. Female bathhouses existed separately, with their own attendants and rituals. While women did not recline in dining rooms alongside men, they too enjoyed the pleasure of warm water, oils, and perfumes. Children, too, could be found splashing in pools, their laughter mingling with the voices of their parents. The atmosphere of the baths was one of gentle leisure. Imagine the warm humidity, the echo of footsteps on marble, the shifting light reflected off rippling water. Picture the relaxed movements of bathers reclining on benches, their skin gleaming with oil, their voices soft as they exchanged gossip or philosophy. The baths were not hurried places. They invited one to linger, to breathe slowly, to let time stretch and soften like the heat in the air. At their grandest, the baths became symbols of imperial generosity. Emperors built them as gifts to the people, monuments of both power and benevolence. To walk through the soaring halls of Caracalla baths was to feel the weight of empire, expressed in stone and water. These complexes could accommodate thousands at once, their scale rivaling temples and theaters. In their walls, Rome declared itself not only powerful but magnanimous, offering comfort and leisure to all who entered. Yet even in modest towns and villages, smaller baths provided the same essential experience. Whether in a provincial outpost or the capital itself, the rhythm of bathing united Romans across distance and class. It was a custom that bound together the far-flung parts of the empire, a shared ritual that spoke to the heart of Roman identity. As night fell and bathers left for home, their bodies clean, their minds calmed, the baths themselves grew quiet. Pools stilled, furnaces dimmed, attendants swept the floors. The echo of voices faded, leaving only the lingering warmth of steam against marble walls. In the silence, one could almost feel the contentment that these places had brought to countless generations, a tranquility that lingered long after the waters had cooled. The baths were Rome's sanctuary, its hearth of leisure. Within their walls, citizens found both cleansing and community, health and harmony. To step into the baths was to step into a world designed not for conquest or politics, but for the simple, profound pleasure of being at ease. And in that ease, Rome revealed a gentler face of its grandeur, one that still whispers across the centuries. In the imagined warmth of water, the glow of lamps, and the soft murmur of voices at rest, no single force shaped the Roman Empire more than its army. It was the steel backbone of Rome's expansion, the shield of its borders, and the silent presence that underpinned the grandeur of its cities. To speak of Rome's army is to speak of discipline, order, and an enduring sense of purpose. Yet beyond battles and campaigns lay a quieter story. The daily lives of soldiers, the rhythm of their duties, and the remarkable system that made the Roman military the envy of the ancient world. At the heart of this force stood the legion, numbering around 5,000 to 6,000 men. Each legion was both a fighting unit and a small city on the march. Soldiers, known as legionaries, were drawn from Roman citizens, trained to an exacting standard, and bound together by loyalty to their commanders and to Rome itself. To see a legion arrayed in formation was to witness a spectacle of precision rows of soldiers, shields glinting in the sun, standards rising above their ranks, their movements synchronized as though they shared one breath. Discipline was the cornerstone of Rome's military success. From the moment a recruit enlisted, his life was governed by rigorous training. Soldiers marched long distances under heavy loads, built camps with unerring regularity, and practiced weapons drills until every motion was instinct. The Roman army prized endurance as much as courage, A soldier was as much a builder as a warrior, able to dig ditches, raise palisades, and construct fortifications at a moment's notice. Their equipment reflected both practicality and ingenuity. The legionary carried the gladius, a short sword designed for close combat, paired with a pilum, a heavy throwing spear whose iron shank bent on impact, preventing enemies from hurling it back. His shield, the curved scutum, offered both protection and the ability to form collective defenses like the famous testudo, or tortoise formation, where shields overlapped above and around the unit. Armor, often of segmented plates known as lorica segmentata, provided mobility and protection, while helmets bore cheek guards and sometimes crests to mark rank. The daily life of a soldier was not one of constant battle, but of steady labor and routine. On campaign, each evening brought the construction of a fortified camp, complete with ditches, palisades, and organized rows of tents. Within these camps, life settled into a rhythm. Cooking meals over small fires, cleaning weapons, caring for pack animals, and maintaining gear. Music of horns and trumpets regulated the hours, signaling work, rest, and watch rotations. Even far from home, a Roman camp carried the order of the city, a fragment of Rome itself transplanted into foreign lands. Pay was modest but steady, and service promised eventual rewards. After years of duty, a soldier might receive land, citizenship for his family, or a pension. For many, the army was a path to advancement, offering not only livelihood but honor. Veterans often settled in colonies, spreading Roman culture and influence into distant provinces. In this way, the army was not only a weapon of conquest, but also a vessel of integration, weaving conquered lands into the fabric of the empire. Alongside the legionaries stood the auxiliaries, non-citizen soldiers drawn from the provinces. These men brought unique skills, cavalry from Gaul and Spain, archers from the east, slingers from the Balearic Islands. Their service was rewarded with citizenship after years of duty, a powerful incentive that bound diverse peoples to Rome. In the auxiliaries, the empire's multicultural spirit found martial expression, as men from distant lands fought under the same eagle standards and marched in step with Roman citizens. The standards themselves held deep symbolic power. Each legion carried its eagle, or aquila, a gleaming emblem of Rome's might. To lose it in battle was a shame beyond words, while to guard it was a sacred duty. Standards served as rallying points, visible above the dust of combat, reminding soldiers that they were not fighting as individuals, but as part of Rome's enduring legacy. Though celebrated for conquest, the army's role was often more defensive than offensive. Along Rome's borders, soldiers manned forts and watchtowers, patrolled frontiers, and maintained roads. The presence of the army deterred rebellion and secured trade routes. Even in peace, their labor built bridges, aqueducts, and walls, structures that endured long after the empire itself faded. The army was as much an instrument of construction as of destruction. Life in the ranks was not without hardship. Campaigns demanded long marches, exposure to harsh weather, and the constant risk of disease. Food was simple grain, legumes, and occasional meat, prepared in makeshift kitchens. Soldiers carried their own equipment, sometimes called Marius mules, for the heavy loads they bore. Punishments for disobedience were severe, ranging from fines to flogging, even to death in extreme cases. Yet this strictness ensured cohesion, making the Roman army an unmatched force on the battlefield. Still, moments of camaraderie softened the harshness of duty. Around evening fires, soldiers shared stories, dice games, and songs. Friendships forged in the ranks often lasted a lifetime, bonds of loyalty that extended beyond the battlefield. In the stillness of night, the quiet hum of conversation mingled with the crackle of flames, and the army, despite its discipline, revealed its human heart. Commanders played a vital role in maintaining both order and morale. A successful general balanced strictness with fairness, bravery with wisdom. Some, like Julius Caesar, became legends, inspiring soldiers with their leadership and earning loyalty that bordered on devotion. Others, less skillful or less compassionate, faced mutiny or desertion. For the legionary, the quality of his commander could shape the tenor of his service, as surely as the outcome of a battle. In the grand sweep of history, Rome's army is remembered for its victories, the conquest of Gaul, the expansion into Britain, the defense of the Rhine and Danube. But equally important was its constancy. For centuries, soldiers stood watch over borders, guarded roads, and built cities. Their presence allowed farmers to till fields, merchants to trade goods, and philosophers to debate ideas in peace. The silent labor of the army upheld the very civilization whose glory we recall. As evening fell on a Roman camp, the sounds of the day subsided. Fires glowed softly within ditches and walls. Shadows stretched long across orderly rows of tents, and sentries took their posts under the stars. The murmurs of soldiers settling to rest drifted into the night, mingling with the distant calls of night birds. In this quiet, the discipline of Rome's army revealed itself not as harshness, but as steadiness. A calm, ordered presence that held the empire secure. The Roman army was not only the hammer of conquest, but the anchor of stability. In its discipline, its endurance, and its daily rhythm, it embodied the values of Rome itself. And as we picture the quiet camps, the gleaming standards, and the steady tread of marching feet, we glimpse the living heart of an empire that endured for centuries, carried forward by men whose lives were bound to the eagle and the shield. To walk the streets of Rome at its peak was to walk in the shadow of countless gods. Their presence was everywhere, on altars by crossroads, in temples that towered above the city, in the small shrines that adorned private homes. The Romans lived in a world saturated with the divine, a world where every act, from planting seeds to setting sail, was bound by ritual and prayer. Religion was not a matter of private faith, but a thread woven through every aspect of life, binding the people to their gods, their ancestors, and their empire. The Roman pantheon was vast and varied. At its heart stood Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the king of the gods, ruler of the sky, and wielder of thunder. His temple crowned the Capitoline Hill, where sacrifices and ceremonies proclaimed Rome's devotion to its protector. With him were Juno, guardian of women and marriage, and Minerva, goddess of wisdom and craft. This great triad embodied the strength, fertility, and intellect upon which Rome prided itself. Yet the gods of Rome were not distant abstractions. They were many and specific, overseeing the countless details of human life. Janus, with his two faces, watched over beginnings and endings, doors and gateways. Vesta, goddess of the hearth, burned at the center of every home, her sacred flame tended by the Vestal virgins in the Forum. Mars, god of war, guarded Rome's armies, while Ceres blessed the fields, Neptune ruled the seas, and Venus inspired love and beauty. Even the humblest acts had their patrons. There were deities of sowing and reaping, of boundaries and doorways, of childbirth and healing. For every stage of life, from the cradle to the grave, a divine figure watched, guiding or protecting. The Romans saw themselves as living in partnership with these forces, their well-being dependent on the careful maintenance of ritual and respect. Ritual lay at the heart of Roman religion. To honor the gods was not merely to believe in them, but to perform the correct actions, the rites that bound human and divine. Sacrifices were offered: grain, wine, honey, incense, and, at times, animals such as sheep, pigs, or oxen. The ritual had to be precise, the right words spoken, the right gestures made, the correct offering given. Any mistake might offend the gods, requiring the ceremony to be repeated. This devotion to form reflected the Roman ideal of pietas, the dutiful respect owed to gods, family, and country. Public festivals punctuated the Roman year, filling the calendar with days of ritual, celebration, and rest. The Saturnalia, held in December, honored Saturn, god of agriculture. For a few days, Social order was playfully inverted, masters served slaves, gifts were exchanged, and merriment filled the streets. In spring, the festival of Floralia celebrated flowers and fertility, with games, theatre, and bright garlands. Each deity had their season, each province its local customs, all absorbed into the rich tapestry of Roman religious life. Temples stood as visible markers of divine presence. Their columns rose above the forum, their steps leading to sanctuaries, where statues of gods watched over the faithful. Inside, priests tended altars, and the air was heavy with the scent of incense and the flicker of oil lamps. To enter a temple was to step into a space between worlds, where mortals could approach the divine. The architecture itself spoke of reverence, the balance of form, the solidity of stone, the careful harmony that mirrored Rome's own ideals of order and endurance. Religion also touched private life in intimate ways. In homes, families kept small shrines known as lararia, painted figures of the household gods. The lares and penates stood beside offerings of food, wine, or incense. Each morning, prayers were spoken, each meal accompanied by small tokens of gratitude. The family head, or paterfamilias, acted as priest for his household, ensuring that the bonds between ancestors, living kin, and divine guardians remained unbroken. In these quiet rituals, the grand cosmos of the gods was brought close, woven into the daily rhythm of Roman life. Priests and priestesses formed a structured hierarchy of religious roles. Some, like the pontifices, oversaw major rites and maintained the sacred calendar. Others, like the augurs, read the will of the gods in the flight of birds or the patterns of lightning. The Vestal Virgins held perhaps the most honored place, charged with keeping Vesta's flame burning eternally. Their lives were dedicated to chastity and service, and their role carried immense prestige as well as responsibility. Through such offices, religion and state were inseparably bound, for to honor the gods was also to honor Rome itself. As Rome expanded, so too did its pantheon. Conquered peoples brought their own gods, who were often absorbed into Roman practice. From Egypt came the worship of Isis, from the east, Mithras, from Gaul and Spain, local deities blended with Roman forms. This openness reflected Rome's strength, a willingness to incorporate, to adapt, to weave new threads into its tapestry, without losing the fabric of tradition. In this way, religion mirrored the empire itself, diverse yet unified, vast yet interconnected. Religion was not free from tension. Philosophers questioned old traditions, and new sects arose. Some embraced, others resisted. Among these, the early followers of Christianity would eventually grow into a faith that transformed the empire. But in the period of Rome's peak, the older gods still reigned, their temples bustling, their festivals joyous, their presence woven into the pulse of daily life. The mood of Roman religion was not one of fear but of balance. To live well was to honor the gods, to keep the rituals, to respect tradition. It was a harmony between mortal and divine, order and devotion. In this balance lay a sense of security, a belief that as long as the gods were honored, Rome itself would endure. Imagine, then, a quiet evening in the city. The sun sets behind the hills, painting the temples in golden light. Incense rises in thin curls from household shrines. Families gather around their hearths, offering a cup of wine to the lares before supper. In the forum, the last worshippers leave the temple steps, their prayers carried on the evening breeze. The city softens into silence, and above it, the stars emerge, the eternal canopy under which gods and mortals alike dwell. In such moments, one can sense the heart of Roman religion, not in grand spectacles alone, but in the quiet continuity of devotion, the gentle rhythm of prayer, the enduring presence of the sacred in daily life. It was this fabric of faith, woven through every home, every street, every field, that gave Rome its sense of destiny. For as long as the gods were honored, Rome believed its flame would never die. In the heart of Rome, life was not only about duty, religion, or family. It was also about leisure, wonder, and the shared joy of spectacle. The Romans, pragmatic in their work and disciplined in their duties, devoted equal passion to the pleasures of entertainment. Across the city, vast arenas, circuses, and theaters opened their gates to crowds eager to be moved by laughter, by awe, or by the thrill of contest. The greatest of these monuments was the Colosseum, an immense amphitheater whose towering arches still rise today. Completed under the Emperor Titus in the year 80 CE, it could hold tens of thousands of spectators. Imagine the crowd gathering at dawn, their voices blending into a low murmur as they streamed through grand entrances. Senators, citizens, freedmen, and slaves all found their places, divided by rank yet united by anticipation. Above them stretched awnings of colored canvas, drawn by sailors of the fleet to shade the people from the sun. When the games began, the arena came alive. First came parades, musicians playing flutes and horns, priests leading animals for sacrifice, gladiators saluting the emperor. The sand of the arena floor gleamed, raked smooth and ready. Then the contests began. Gladiators, armed with swords, nets, or tridents, faced one another in combat. The clash of metal, the skillful feints, the sudden turns of fortune, all held the audience spellbound. Some fought to the death, others until honor was satisfied, but always the games displayed courage, endurance, and spectacle. Between the combats, wild beast hunts filled the arena. Lions from Africa, leopards from Asia, bears from the forests of the north, all were brought to Rome, symbols of the empire's reach. Hunters armed with spears and bows faced them in elaborate displays. Sometimes entire landscapes were recreated in the arena: forests, lakes, even ships on water. The Colosseum became a stage upon which the vastness of the world was displayed for Rome's citizens. Yet not all entertainment was fierce. Laughter filled the theaters, where comedies and farces were performed before eager audiences. Roman playwrights drew on both Greek tradition and local humor, weaving tales of clever slaves, pompous masters, and tangled love affairs. Actors, masked and costumed, played their roles with exaggerated gestures, ensuring that even those seated far from the stage could follow the plot. In the cool shade of the theater, the people of Rome found escape in wit and story. For sheer scale, no spectacle surpassed the races of the Circus Maximus. This immense stadium, capable of holding more than 200,000 spectators, stretched along the valley between the Palatine and Aventine hills. Here, charioteers guided teams of horses, 2, 4, or even more, around the track at breathtaking speed. The racecourse was long, and the turns sharp, demanding daring skill. Collisions were common, wheels splintering, horses tumbling, drivers thrown. The crowd gasped, cheered, and urged their favorite teams onward. The chariot races were more than sport, they were a passion. Fans divided into factions: reds, whites, blues, and greens, each with loyal followings. Supporters wore their colors proudly, wagering on victories, debating rivalries, and celebrating triumphs. The excitement pulsed through the city, for to see one's team win was to feel the joy of belonging, of sharing in the triumph of speed and daring. Amphitheaters, circuses, and theaters were joined by smaller forms of entertainment. Public baths offered relaxation, as well as social life: warm waters, cool pools, and spaces for exercise or conversation. Musicians played in taverns, jugglers performed in marketplaces, dancers and storytellers entertained in private homes. Festivals added another layer, filling the streets with processions, masks, and songs. At such times, the city itself seemed a stage, and all its people, participants in the performance. Behind the grandeur lay a deeper meaning. Entertainment was not only amusement, but a form of unity. In the Colosseum, the Circus Maximus, or the theater, Romans of all classes sat side by side. The spectacles reminded them of their empire's power, its reach across the world, its capacity to astonish and delight. The emperor himself often sponsored the games, ensuring that the people felt his generosity. Bread and spectacle. As some would later say, kept the city's millions fed and content. There was also an element of ritual. The games were often tied to religious festivals, honoring gods or commemorating victories. Sacrifices accompanied the spectacles, prayers rose before the races, and the laughter of the theater was seen as a gift to the gods, who watched over joy as well as duty. Thus, even in entertainment, Rome maintained the rhythm of reverence and celebration. Not everyone approved of such spectacles. Philosophers sometimes criticized them as distractions from wisdom and virtue. The violence of gladiatorial games troubled some, who questioned the morality of finding joy in bloodshed. Yet the crowds came, generation after generation, filling the seats, shouting their approval, swept into the collective tide of feeling. For most Romans, the games and races were not mere diversions, but an essential part of life, a balance to the duties of labor, family, and devotion. As the sun set over the city, the echoes of the day's entertainments lingered. The sand of the arena, stained and scattered, would be smoothed once more for the next day's contests. The Circus Maximus, silent now, would soon hear again the thunder of hooves. The theaters would raise their curtains, the baths would fill with laughter, the streets would hum with songs. Rome never lacked for spectacle, never ceased to remind its people of the grandeur they shared. And so entertainment in Rome was more than a pastime. It was a mirror of the empire itself, vast, diverse, bold, and communal. From the roar of the Colosseum to the swift races of the circus, from the laughter of the theater to the quiet pleasure of music by lamplight, Rome lived not only by discipline and order, but also by joy. Imagine yourself among them, seated on the marble steps of a theater, the cool evening breeze on your face, or beneath the canvas awning of the Colosseum, as the crowd's cheer rises around you, or in the Circus Maximus, as chariots whirl past in a blur of dust and speed. The spectacle surrounds you, carrying you into its rhythm, leaving you exhilarated yet soothed, part of a city alive with wonder. To understand the greatness of Rome, one must look not only at its armies, its emperors, or its spectacles, but also at its stones, arches, and lines of roads stretching across the land. The Romans were not content to let nature dictate their limits. With patience, precision, and ingenuity, they bent rivers to their will, carved pathways through mountains, and built bridges that defied time. Their engineering was more than utility. It was the backbone of empire, binding provinces together in strength and order. The most celebrated of these achievements were the aqueducts, long channels of stone that carried fresh water from distant springs into the heart of the city. Rome, with its 1,000,000 inhabitants, could not have thrived without them. Imagine standing beneath the arches of the Aqua Claudia, one of the grand aqueducts, completed in the 1st century CE. Its tall stone piers rise in solemn rhythm, each arch supporting the next, stretching mile after mile across the countryside. High above, water flowed silently, guided by a steady gradient so slight it could hardly be seen, yet precise enough to bring life, giving streams to fountains, baths, and homes. The aqueducts were marvels of calculation. Surveyors with simple tools, plumb lines, water levels, and rods, measured landscapes with care. Workers carved tunnels through hillsides, built channels of concrete and brick, and lined them with waterproof plaster. In valleys, they raised arcades of arches, elegant and strong. Though built for necessity, these structures carried a grace that seemed almost ceremonial, as if the gods themselves had guided the stone. From the aqueducts flowed abundance. Public fountains gushed with clear streams where citizens filled their jars. Baths welcomed crowds into warm pools, fed by constant flow. Latrines were kept clean by running water, a quiet but vital mark of public health. In villas and palaces, trickling streams cooled gardens, reminding Romans that civilization meant the harnessing of nature for human comfort. Beyond water, the Romans turned their genius to roads. The empire stretched over vast lands, and to hold it together, Rome needed swift and reliable paths. From Britain to Mesopotamia, from the deserts of Africa to the forests of Gaul, Roman roads ran straight and enduring. Soldiers, traders, messengers, and travelers all moved along them, carrying with them the breath of empire. The method of building was both practical and durable. First, surveyors chose a course, often the straightest possible, undeterred by hills or marshes. Then workers dug deep trenches, layering stone, gravel, and sand, compacted until firm. Atop this foundation lay great paving stones, fitted so closely that centuries of wear could not loosen them. At the sides, drainage ditches ensured that rain would not weaken the structure. Thus a Roman road was more than a path. It was a promise of permanence, a ribbon of order across untamed land. To walk upon such a road was to feel connected to the vastness of Rome. Milestones marked distances, each stone engraved with the name of the emperor under whom it was set. Inns and way stations offered shelter for travelers, and fresh horses for couriers. Caravans of merchants moved slowly with their wares, while legions marched in perfect rhythm, the sound of their sandals echoing on the stones. Even today, fragments of these roads remain, silent testimony to a vision of unity carved in stone. The bridges of Rome extended this vision across rivers and valleys. Arches of stone carried pathways above rushing waters, their design both simple and strong. The secret lay in the keystone, placed at the arch's summit, which transferred weight outward to the supports. With this principle, the Romans built bridges that seemed to float with ease, resisting floods and the passage of time. Crossing such a bridge, one might feel the river's power below, yet walk safely above, guided by the hand of human craft. In the cities, engineering gave shape to daily life. Sewers carried waste away, ensuring cleanliness. Streets were paved, lined with raised sidewalks for pedestrians. Markets were covered by vaulted roofs, their spaces airy and bright. The Colosseum itself, though a theater of spectacle, was also an engineering marvel, with corridors, stairways, and lifts so efficient that tens of thousands could enter and exit with ease. Beneath the sand of its arena lay a complex of trapdoors and machinery, testimony to the Romans' command of both stone and imagination. The principles of Roman engineering were not hidden. Writers such as Vitruvius recorded them, explaining proportions, materials, and methods. Yet beyond the calculations lay a spirit of order. The Romans built not merely for the present, but for centuries to come. Their structures were meant to endure, to declare that Rome's power was not fleeting, but eternal. Consider, too, the quiet beauty of their work. An aqueduct in the evening light, its arches casting long shadows across a field. A road disappearing into the horizon, flanked by trees and milestones. A bridge arching gracefully over calm water, its reflection doubled below. These were not monuments of vanity, but gifts of utility and harmony, blending human need with the landscape's form. To the people of Rome, these works inspired confidence. A citizen could walk from one province to another, secure that the roads would guide him, the bridges would support him, the aqueducts would refresh him upon arrival. The empire felt smaller, more intimate, because its arteries of stone and water joined distant lands into a single body. And so, Roman engineering was both practical and poetic. It fed the city, carried its armies, and bound its provinces. But it also offered assurance that life was ordered, that the empire was enduring, that the world itself could be shaped by careful hands. Even now, to stand among their remains is to feel the quiet power of discipline, joined with vision. As night falls, imagine yourself walking along a Roman road. The stones are cool beneath your feet, the air scented with pine and distant fires. In the fading light, you see the arches of an aqueduct against the horizon, carrying water silently toward the city. A bridge spans the river ahead, its stones worn smooth by countless travelers. You step upon it, the current murmuring below, and feel the calm strength of Roman craft beneath you. The road stretches onward, steady, unbroken, guiding you gently into the silence of evening. Religion was the invisible thread woven through every part of Roman life. From the moment a child was born to the day a funeral fire was lit, the gods were present, guardians, guides, and sometimes stern watchers. Rome was never without their presence. In temples, at crossroads, in the hearths of homes, the divine mingled with the ordinary, reminding Romans that their city and empire existed under heaven's watchful gaze. The Romans practiced a polytheistic faith, believing in a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with a domain. Jupiter Optimus Maximus, ruler of the skies, stood at the head, his thunderbolts symbols of authority and protection. His consort, Juno, guarded marriage and women. Minerva, goddess of wisdom, watched over learning and crafts. Mars, fierce and honored, was not only a god of war, but also a protector of agriculture, linking battle to the soil from which Rome's strength grew. Around them gathered a host of deities, each attending to a fragment of human existence. Vesta for the hearth, Ceres for the grain, Neptune for the sea, Venus for love, and countless others. Temples dotted the city of Rome, each a sacred house for a god. The temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, crowning the Capitoline Hill, was among the grandest. Approaching its steps, one would see towering columns and a triangular pediment, beneath which lay the dark, cool chamber where statues of the gods resided. Within, offerings of wine, incense, or sacrificed animals were given, their smoke rising toward the heavens. Yet the temples were not only places of worship, but also public symbols, reminders of Rome's devotion and power, visible against the skyline. Religion was not a matter of private belief alone, but a public duty, woven into the state itself. Priests, known as pontifices, oversaw rituals that bound Rome to the gods. Augurs observed the flight of birds, interpreting their patterns as divine signs before wars, elections, or great undertakings. Vestal virgins tended the sacred fire of Vesta, ensuring it never went out, for its flame symbolized the life of the city. Festivals filled the calendar, each day marked with rituals, games, and sacrifices dedicated to the gods who maintained cosmic balance. At home, religion was quieter, yet no less present. Each household honored Lairs and Penates, guardian spirits of family and pantry. Small shrines, called Lauraria, decorated with painted figures or statuettes, held daily offerings of wine, food, or incense. The father of the family performed rites, speaking simple prayers, thanking the spirits for protection and asking for continued blessings. The hearth fire itself was sacred, for warmth and nourishment were seen as gifts of the divine. The Romans were practical in their worship, seeking not mystical union, but pietas, the proper respect owed to gods, family, and country. Pietas meant fulfilling obligations faithfully, making offerings, keeping vows, observing rituals. In return, the gods granted favor, or what the Romans called numen, a divine presence that sustained both personal fortunes and the empire itself. If Rome prospered, it was because the gods were satisfied. If disaster struck, it was because rituals had been neglected or vows broken. Rome's expansion brought encounters with countless other faiths. Rather than suppressing them, the Romans often welcomed foreign gods into their pantheon. From Greece came Apollo, Hermes, and Dionysus, absorbed with new names but familiar qualities. From Egypt came Isis and Serapis, worshipped with mystery and devotion. From the east arrived Mithras, whose cult spread among soldiers. The Roman religion became a vast tapestry, its threads drawn from lands across the empire, each deity adding richness to Rome's spiritual life. Rituals were conducted with a sense of precision. A wrong word or misstep could invalidate the ceremony, requiring it to be repeated. Yet they were not gloomy affairs. Festivals such as the Saturnalia filled the city. With merriment, masters and slaves exchanged roles, gifts were given, and feasts lasted for days. Other festivals honored the dead, inviting families to gather at tombs, share meals, and pour wine upon the graves, ensuring that ancestors were remembered and content. Philosophers, too, found meaning in religion, though often in different ways. Some, like the Stoics, saw the gods as expressions of reason and order in the universe. Others treated myths as allegories, stories pointing toward deeper truths. Still, for the ordinary citizen, the rituals and festivals, the prayers and offerings, were not abstractions but living acts, connecting the mortal to the eternal. Religion also had a role in politics. Victorious generals promised temples to the gods, and upon returning in triumph, they built them, marking the city with monuments of piety. Emperors were often associated with divine favor. Some even worshipped after death as divinized figures. To stand in a forum surrounded by temples was to see power and faith intertwined, each reinforcing the other. The Romans did not imagine their gods as distant beings, far removed from the world. Instead, the divine was present in every field, every hearth, every wind and storm. Sacred groves and springs were dedicated to spirits. Crossroads bore small shrines where travelers paused to give offerings. Even the boundaries of fields were marked by sacred stones, overseen by the god Terminus, ensuring peace and respect among neighbors. And yet, beneath the grandeur, religion was also personal. A farmer whispered prayers before sowing seed, hoping for Ceres's blessing. A sailor cast wine into the sea, asking Neptune for calm waters. A mother lit incense before the household shrine, seeking protection for her children. These small acts, multiplied across the city and empire, created a rhythm of devotion, quiet and continuous, like the heartbeat of Roman life. As dusk fell, the temples glowed in lamplight, their steps echoing with the last worshippers of the day. Smoke from sacrifices drifted upward, mingling with the stars. In countless homes, tiny flames flickered in household shrines, carrying prayers into the night. For the Romans, the gods were never far away, and in honoring them, they felt that they honored the very order of the universe. To imagine this world is to feel both majesty and calm. Picture yourself walking along a Roman street at evening. The air carries the scent of incense from a nearby temple. From a house doorway, you glimpse a small altar glowing in firelight. The sky above is deep and filled with stars, and you sense the presence of the gods. Steady and timeless, watching over the city, you breathe deeply, and with that breath, you join for a moment in the harmony that sustained Rome for centuries. Life in Rome was not only about duty, politics, or the solemnity of worship. It was also marked by moments of joy, celebration, and ritual that lifted the spirit and bound the community together. The Roman calendar was filled with festivals, some sacred and serious, others filled with laughter, games, and merriment. These occasions punctuated the year like bright jewels, each bringing relief from daily toil and a reminder of the god's presence in every season. Among the most beloved was the Saturnalia, held in December in honor of Saturn, the ancient god of sowing and time. For several days, the ordinary rules of society were turned upside down. Masters served meals to their slaves, children were treated as equals, and laughter echoed through homes and streets. Gifts of candles and small figurines were exchanged, symbolizing light and renewal. Banquets overflowed with food and wine, and merriment carried on long into the winter nights. Saturnalia was a festival of freedom, reminding Romans that beneath the rigid structures of society lay a shared humanity, warmed by joy and laughter. Another festival, vibrant and striking, was the Lupercalia, celebrated in February, rooted in ancient fertility rites. It began with priests of the Luperci performing sacrifices in a cave believed to be the legendary shelter of Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. Dressed in goat skins, they ran through the streets, gently striking women with strips of hide. Far from offense, this was welcomed as a charm to bring fertility and ease in childbirth. The festival blended ritual and play, recalling Rome's mythical origins, while offering hope for renewed life as spring approached. The Floralia, held in late April, honored Flora, goddess of flowers and blossoming plants. As blossoms filled the fields, The city itself was adorned with garlands. Theaters hosted lively performances, and dancers scattered petals before the crowds. The festival celebrated renewal and beauty, drawing people outdoors to rejoice in the colors and fragrances of spring. It was a gentle, playful celebration, reminding all of the joy found in simple growth and nature's renewal. Summer brought the Ludi Apollinaires, games held in honor of Apollo. Chariot races thundered in the Circus Maximus, plays filled the theaters, and sacrifices honored the god of music, prophecy, and healing. These games were a blend of reverence and spectacle, offering entertainment while affirming Rome's connection to divine guardianship. For spectators, they were a moment to bask in both delight and devotion under the summer sun. Not all festivals were devoted to merriment. Some were deeply solemn, reminding Romans of their duty to ancestors and the dead. During the Parentalia, in February, families visited the tombs of their loved ones. They brought garlands, bread, and wine, sharing meals at the graves, ensuring the spirits were remembered and honored. For 9 days, the city was hushed, public business paused, and private devotion filled the air. The festival ended with the Feralia, a final day of offerings to the departed, affirming that the living and the dead remained bound by memory and respect. In May, the Lemuria took place, a nocturnal festival to appease restless spirits. At night, the head of the household rose, walking barefoot through the home. In silence, he made offerings of beans, casting them behind him to draw away wandering ghosts. Ritual words were spoken, and the family was thus protected. It was a reminder that not all spirits were gentle, and that harmony required attention, even to the unseen and troubling presences. Festivals also marked Rome's political and military life. The triumph, though not recurring annually, was itself a kind of festival, a grand procession granted to victorious generals. Soldiers marched through the streets, spoils of war were displayed, captives paraded, and the general rode in a chariot crowned with laurels. Though solemn in purpose, the triumph was also celebratory, uniting the city in pride and joy. It transformed victory into shared glory, affirming that Rome's strength was the strength of its people and its gods. Even daily life was touched by smaller feasts and rituals. The calends, the first day of each month, was marked with offerings to Juno, while the Ides and Nones carried their own observances. Weddings, births, and harvests were all accompanied by festive rites, turning private events into moments of shared community. For the Romans, celebration was not confined to great occasions, but woven into the rhythm of life itself. These festivals reflected the Roman sense of balance. There were days for laughter and play, days for solemn remembrance, and days for grand display. Each kept the people connected, to one another, to their ancestors, and to the gods who watched over them. Together, they formed a tapestry of time, making the year a cycle of renewal, gratitude, and joy. The atmosphere of these festivals must have been rich with sound and color. Imagine walking through Rome during Saturnalia, the streets alive with music, the air carrying the smell of roasting food, and garlands hung from doorways. Or picture the quiet dignity of Parentalia. Families gathered with lanterns at twilight, the flicker of firelight against tombstones, voices murmuring prayers to the departed. Each celebration, whether noisy or hushed, was a reminder of belonging, to family, to city, to the vast story of Rome itself. Festivals also softened the hardships of life. For the poor, they offered free feasts, games, and moments of joy. For the weary, they provided pause, a time when work was set aside and hearts were lifted. For all, they reaffirmed the bond between mortal and divine, ensuring that Rome's fortunes remained under favorable skies. As evening falls in this imagined Rome, the noise of a festival drifts into calm. Lamps are lit, garlands droop gently in the night air, and laughter fades into quiet conversation. The gods, honored with offerings and joy, rest content. The people, weary from celebration, return to their homes, carrying with them the warmth of shared memory. In this way, the festivals of Rome were not only moments of spectacle, but also threads of comfort, tying each year into a circle of renewal and peace. The grandeur of Rome rested not only upon its armies, buildings, and laws, but also upon the minds it nurtured. To the Romans, education was a path toward shaping good citizens, eloquent speakers, and wise leaders. Though not every Roman had access to formal schooling, learning was valued as a mark of refinement and as a tool for guiding the state. In quiet courtyards, small classrooms, and the halls of philosophers, knowledge was passed from one generation to the next, binding Rome's future to its traditions of thought. For the youngest children, education began at home. Mothers often taught their little ones the basics: how to speak clearly, behave politely, and honor the gods. Fathers, too, played a role, especially in instilling values of discipline, respect, and duty. From the start, Roman education was not only about letters and numbers, but also about character. A Roman child was to grow into a responsible adult, prepared to serve family and city with integrity. Formal schooling typically began around the age of 7. Boys, and sometimes girls from wealthier families, were sent to a literator, the elementary teacher. In a modest room, perhaps shaded from the sun, the teacher guided pupils in reading, writing, and arithmetic. The tools were simple yet effective wooden tablets covered with wax for practicing letters, a stylus for inscribing, and small counters for reckoning sums. Lessons were not gentle by modern standards. Discipline could be stern, for Romans believed that order and effort shaped strong minds. As children grew older, some advanced to the grammaticus, the secondary teacher. Here the focus shifted to literature, especially the works of great poets such as Homer and Virgil. Students read passages aloud, committed lines to memory, and learned to analyze style and meaning. They studied history and mythology, discovering examples of virtue and caution in the tales of heroes and gods. Grammar, the careful structure of language, was treated with reverence, for to speak and write well was to wield power in public life. The pinnacle of education came under the guidance of the rhetor, the teacher of rhetoric. Rhetoric, the art of persuasion, was essential in Rome, where politics, law, and public debate demanded eloquence. Students learned to compose speeches, structure arguments, and move audiences with clarity and passion. They practiced declamation, delivering speeches on imagined cases or moral questions, until their voices carried confidence and their words struck with precision. To master rhetoric was to step into the world of leadership, for in Rome, speech could command legions and shape laws. Not all learning took place in formal classrooms. Many wealthy families hired private tutors, often Greek slaves or freedmen, who were prized for their learning. Greek influence on Roman education was profound. The Romans admired Greek philosophy, literature, and science, adopting much of it into their own system. A Roman youth might spend as much time reading Plato or Aristotle as studying Roman law or history. In this way, education became a bridge between cultures, uniting Roman practicality with Greek thought. Philosophy, in particular, held a special place in Roman learning. Schools of thought such as Stoicism and Epicureanism offered guidance on how to live wisely and well. Stoicism, embraced by figures like Seneca and the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, taught endurance, virtue, and harmony with nature. It urged self-control and reminded men that true freedom lay in mastering the self, not the world. Epicureanism, though often misunderstood, counseled moderation, friendship, and the pursuit of simple pleasures. To study philosophy was not merely an intellectual exercise, but a way of shaping the soul. Libraries, too, became sanctuaries of learning. In Rome and other great cities of the empire, collections of scrolls were gathered, copied, and shared. Students and scholars could consult works of poetry, science, and law, their minds enriched by the thoughts of ages past. Though books were fragile, copied by hand onto papyrus or parchment, the love of words ensured their survival. A library was more than a storehouse. It was a symbol of civilization itself. A quiet reminder that Rome valued not only conquest but also knowledge. Education, however, was not evenly shared. Boys of wealthy families were most likely to benefit, while the poor often learned only practical skills through work and trade. Girls were taught more often at home, though some studied literature and music if their families allowed. Still, even among the less privileged, a respect for learning endured. In taverns and workshops, men repeated proverbs and verses, fragments of the education that echoed through Roman life. What made Roman education unique was its blend of practicality and idealism. Children were taught to read contracts, count coins, and manage estates, yet they were also urged to ponder honor, justice, and duty. The goal was not only to produce skilled individuals, but to create citizens worthy of Rome's greatness. To read Virgil was to learn not only poetry, but also patriotism. To practice rhetoric was to prepare for service in the Forum or the Senate. Imagine a day in the life of a Roman student. At dawn, he rises, greeted by the soft light of oil lamps. His wax tablet is tucked under his arm. As he makes his way through narrow streets to the teacher's room, he recites lines from Homer, his voice mingling with those of his classmates. The teacher corrects his grammar, praises his memory, and urges him toward clarity. Later, under the rhetor, he practices a speech, his heart racing as he raises his voice to persuade. Each word, each lesson, is a step toward becoming a man of Rome, capable of standing in the Senate or commanding in the field. As evening falls, the student returns home. Perhaps he sits with his father to discuss the day's lessons, or listens as his tutor reads aloud from a philosopher's work. The flicker of lamplight casts long shadows, and the boy dreams of the future, where learning will guide his path. In such moments, the quiet dignity of Roman education reveals itself, not as a burden, but as a gift that endures beyond youth, shaping the mind and spirit for a lifetime. In the vast story of Rome, education was the invisible thread weaving discipline, eloquence, and wisdom into the fabric of society. It prepared leaders, preserved tradition, and opened the mind to both practical skill and timeless truth. To the Romans, learning was not a fleeting pursuit, but a foundation, steady as stone, upon which the empire's greatness rested. Beyond the bustle of marketplaces and the roar of the Colosseum, there existed another Rome, a quieter Rome, where men and women turned inward to contemplate life's meaning. In gardens, porticos, and candlelit chambers, philosophy offered guidance, comfort, and clarity. For the Romans, philosophy was not an abstract puzzle or a pastime reserved for scholars. It was a way of living, a discipline for the soul, a lantern by which one might navigate the uncertainties of existence. Roman philosophy did not arise in isolation. It grew from seeds planted in Greece, adapting and reshaping them to suit Roman life. Stoicism, Epicureanism, and later, Platonism all found eager followers among Roman citizens. Though each school of thought differed, they shared a common aim: to teach how one might live well, endure hardship, and seek peace of mind in a world often full of turmoil. Stoicism, perhaps the most celebrated among Romans, resonated deeply with their values of duty, endurance, and order. Founded by the Greek philosopher Zeno, Stoicism taught that virtue was the highest good, and that wisdom lay in aligning oneself with nature's order. For the Stoic, the external world was beyond control. What mattered was the mastery of one's inner responses. Wealth, status, and even life itself were fleeting, but virtue, justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom was eternal. In Rome, Stoicism found champions in statesmen and emperors. Seneca, the philosopher and tutor to Nero, wrote letters full of calm advice. To meet fortune with equanimity, to see wealth as a tool, not a treasure, and to value time as the most precious possession. Epictetus, once a slave, spoke of freedom not as release from chains, but as liberation from fear and desire. And Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome at its height, recorded his thoughts in quiet moments of reflection. His meditations remain a testament to Stoic serenity, offering gentle reminders that life is short and virtue is always within one's grasp. Epicureanism, though often misunderstood, carried its own gentle wisdom. Founded by Epicurus, this philosophy sought not wild indulgence, but tranquility of mind. Epicureans taught that pleasure, properly understood, was the absence of pain and disturbance. True happiness lay in simple living, in cultivating friendship, and in freeing oneself from irrational fears, especially the fear of death. To sit in a shaded garden, sharing bread, olives, and laughter with companions, was to live in harmony with Epicurus' vision. For Romans wearied by ambition or the burdens of office, Epicureanism offered a retreat, a reminder that joy could be found not in conquest or wealth, but in contentment. The poet Lucretius, in his great work on the nature of things, wove Epicurean thought into poetry, exploring the nature of atoms, the soul, and the universe itself. His verses calmed readers with the assurance that the world followed natural laws, not the whims of capricious gods. Other traditions, too, shaped Roman minds. Platonism and Aristotelian thought found devoted followers. Platonists looked to the realm of ideals, seeking truth beyond the shadows of earthly life. They spoke of the soul's immortality and the pursuit of wisdom as a path toward the divine. Meanwhile, Aristotelian logic and inquiry provided tools for law, science, and governance. In Rome's intellectual circles, debates flourished, yet all schools were united in the search for understanding. Philosophy in Rome was not confined to scrolls and lectures, it was lived daily. A senator might steady himself with Stoic maxims before entering the Senate. A soldier might recall Epicurean calm when facing death in battle. A merchant might apply Aristotelian reasoning in his dealings. The wisdom of the philosophers was meant to be carried in the pocket of the mind, ready to be drawn upon in times of hardship or doubt. Consider the image of Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the known world, sitting alone at night in his tent by the Danube. Outside, soldiers kept watch, the fires of camp flickered, and the winds swept across the frontier. Within, the emperor bent over his writing tablet, composing reflections not of war or conquest, but of patience, humility, and the fleeting nature of life. Do not waste what remains of life in speculating about others, he reminded himself. Instead, turn inward and see the wellspring of good within you. Such moments capture the essence of Roman philosophy, a turning inward, a quiet strength amidst noise and responsibility. Philosophy was not about escaping life, but about engaging with it wisely, with eyes clear and heart steady. Education and rhetoric introduced many Roman youths to philosophy. Teachers urged them to memorize not only lines of poetry, but also maxims of wisdom. Phrases such as memento mori, remember you must die, became part of the cultural fabric, encouraging reflection on mortality and the proper use of time. Philosophical discussions often unfolded during meals, where guests debated questions of virtue, justice, and the soul's nature. Women, too, found guidance in philosophy. Though often excluded from formal schools, many Roman women studied privately, reading works of philosophers and engaging in thoughtful conversation. For them, as for men, philosophy offered counsel for navigating life's joys and burdens. In the daily rhythm of Roman life, philosophy provided balance. It tempered ambition with humility, softened grief with perspective, and brightened solitude with companionship of thought. In times of triumph, it reminded Romans not to grow proud. In times of loss, it consoled them with reminders of life's natural cycles. Imagine walking through a shaded Roman garden, where students gather around a teacher. The sound of birdsong mingles with quiet voices as questions are posed and answers offered. One student asks how to endure the death of a friend. Another wonders whether wealth can ever bring happiness. The teacher, calm and patient, draws upon the wisdom of Stoics, Epicureans, and Platonists. weaving their thoughts into gentle counsel. The afternoon sun softens, the air cools, and the words linger like a balm. In this way, philosophy was not a lofty abstraction but a companion, present in grief, in joy, in solitude, and in the company of others. It was a mirror in which Romans examined themselves, and a compass by which they sought direction. As the centuries passed, Roman philosophy would influence Christian thinkers, medieval scholars, and countless generations beyond. Yet even in its own time, its purpose was simple and profound: to help individuals live with virtue, peace, and clarity. In the heart of Rome, amidst all the noise and spectacle, philosophy whispered softly, inviting the thoughtful to pause, reflect, and discover that wisdom was not a distant prize, but a quiet flame already glowing within. The strength of Rome did not rest only upon its legions or its emperors. Beneath the grandeur of politics and spectacle, a quieter genius unfolded, the genius of builders, engineers, and thinkers who shaped the physical world into an enduring masterpiece. Roman science and engineering were less about lofty speculation and more about practical achievement. They sought not to dream of impossible wonders, but to create lasting works that would serve people for centuries. Walk through any Roman city, and their handiwork is everywhere. Roads stretch straight and unbroken across the landscape. Aqueducts rise on elegant arches, carrying fresh water from distant hills into bustling towns. Bridges span wide rivers, strong enough to bear carts and armies. Public baths, theaters, and amphitheaters reveal careful planning in design and structure. The Romans took the raw tools of science and used them to shape daily life, combining utility with beauty. Perhaps the most famous of their achievements were the roads. To govern an empire that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia, Rome needed paths that could endure. Roman engineers surveyed with precision, marking routes that often ran straight across valleys and hills alike. Layers of stone, gravel, and sand were laid with care, topped by large paving stones fitted together like a puzzle. These roads were crowned slightly in the middle to allow rainwater to run off, preventing erosion. They were so well made that many still exist today, their stones smoothed by the footsteps of generations. Travelers along these roads might meet merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and messengers. Mile markers guided the way, while inns offered food and lodging. A Roman saying captured their brilliance: all roads lead to Rome. And indeed, through this vast network, the empire was bound together, its provinces linked like threads in a woven cloth. Equally impressive were the aqueducts, those quiet rivers in the sky. Rome's population grew into the hundreds of thousands, and the city's thirst was immense. Engineers answered by channeling water from distant springs and mountains, carrying it across valleys by means of arched structures that seemed both graceful and eternal. Gravity, steady and patient, did the work, guiding the water along a gentle slope. From the aqueducts, the flow was directed into fountains, baths, cisterns, and even private homes. To walk beneath an aqueduct was to marvel at Rome's command of nature. The steady trickle and rush of water brought health, cleanliness, and comfort. Public baths supplied by these channels became not only places of washing but centers of social life and relaxation. In this way, science served not only the body but also the spirit of community. The Romans were masters of concrete, a material that changed the world. Mixed from lime, volcanic ash, and rubble, Roman concrete was strong, flexible, and capable of hardening even underwater. With it, they built harbors that resisted the waves, domes that stretched toward the sky, and structures that still stand after 2 millennia. The Pantheon, with its vast and unbroken dome, is perhaps the greatest testimony to this innovation. Standing beneath it, one feels the harmony of science and artistry, a union achieved through careful calculation and bold imagination. Bridges and arches, too, carried the Roman stamp. The arch, borrowed from earlier cultures, was perfected in Roman hands. By channeling weight into supporting pillars, The arch allowed for wide spans and towering structures. Bridges such as the Pons Fabricius in Rome still stand, their stones locked together in quiet strength. Amphitheatres, aqueducts, and triumphal arches all relied upon this elegant form, demonstrating Rome's mastery of balance and proportion. Roman science was practical, but it did not ignore inquiry. Writers such as Pliny the Elder compiled vast works of natural history, gathering knowledge of plants, animals, and minerals. Physicians like Galen studied the human body, developing theories that influenced medicine for centuries. Astronomers charted the stars, while surveyors refined instruments for measuring land. Though not all of their conclusions were correct, their spirit of observation laid groundwork for future generations. In the countryside, engineering transformed agriculture. Romans built irrigation systems, drainage canals, and water wheels. Farms produced wheat, olives, grapes, and vegetables with increasing efficiency, sustaining both rural communities and the hungry metropolis of Rome. Science met the soil, ensuring stability for the empire's vast population. Even in entertainment, Roman engineering shone. The Colosseum, vast enough to seat tens of thousands, contained a complex system of corridors, lifts, and trapdoors. Animals and gladiators appeared suddenly in the arena, lifted by hidden machinery. Awning systems shaded the audience from the sun, while clever design allowed crowds to enter and exit swiftly. To sit in such a place was to witness not only spectacle, but also the triumph of engineering over chaos. Consider, too, the Roman bathhouses. These complexes required careful heating systems. Furnaces beneath the floors warmed air that circulated through hollow bricks in the walls, creating an early form of central heating called the hypocaust. Warm rooms, hot pools, and cool chambers offered comfort and health to citizens of all classes. Such innovations remind us that Roman science touched even the simplest daily rituals. Yet perhaps what is most soothing to consider is the harmony between ambition and patience in Roman engineering. Their works were not hurried. They were designed for the long term. A road was built to last centuries, an aqueduct to carry water across generations, a bridge to endure countless crossings. Each project reflected foresight, discipline, and the belief that human skill could tame both stone and water. Imagine standing on a Roman road at dusk. The stones beneath your feet are warm from the day's sun. In the distance, an aqueduct arches gracefully across the horizon, its silhouette softened by twilight. The air is quiet except for the trickle of water and the faint tread of footsteps. In this stillness, the genius of Roman engineering reveals itself not in grand speeches or loud proclamations, but in the steady pulse of daily life it sustains. The legacy of Roman science and engineering endures all around us. In bridges and roads, in domes and aqueducts, in the very idea that practical knowledge should serve the common good. Rome left a foundation upon which later civilizations would build. Their creations were not merely functional. They were symbols of stability, resilience, and the belief that human reason could shape the world with harmony and grace. In the story of Rome, armies may have won battles and emperors may have ruled, but it was the quiet, enduring work of engineers and thinkers that gave the empire its lasting strength. Their science was not distant or cold, but warm with purpose, touching every life. Every day, in ways both great and small, health, like roads and aqueducts, was an essential concern for the Romans. In a vast and bustling empire, where millions lived in crowded cities or labored in the countryside, the need to understand and preserve well-being was ever present. Roman medicine combined ancient traditions, practical observation, and above all, a respect for balance and cleanliness. Though their knowledge was far from modern science, the Romans developed systems of care that kept their communities thriving for centuries. At the heart of Roman medicine lay a blending of cultures. Much of their knowledge came from Greece. Physicians trained in the works of Hippocrates, and later Galen shaped Roman thought. bringing with them theories of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health, they believed, depended on the balance of these fluids. A fever might be treated by cooling foods or baths. A sluggishness of spirit might call for exercise or a change of diet. To restore balance was to restore health. Roman medicine was not practiced only in theory. It lived in the hands of physicians, midwives, herbalists, and household caretakers. Wealthy families often had personal doctors, sometimes Greek slaves trained in healing. In cities, physicians offered services to the public, while in rural areas, remedies were passed down from parent to child. Women, in particular, played an important role, tending to families with knowledge of herbs, poultices, and the soothing arts of care. The Roman military also shaped medicine. Armies on campaign could not afford to lose soldiers to illness or injury, and so the Romans developed organized medical corps. Military camps included field hospitals, where surgeons treated wounds, set broken bones, and applied bandages soaked in wine, believed to cleanse and prevent infection. Surgical instruments, many of which survive today, reveal a surprising sophistication. Scalpels, forceps, and probes, crafted with precision. Discipline and order extended from the battlefield to the sick room, ensuring that health was preserved even in the harshest conditions. Public health was another hallmark of Roman life. Few civilizations before them had cared so deeply for sanitation on a grand scale. Aqueducts delivered clean water into cities, while elaborate sewer systems, such as Rome's Cloaca Maxima, carried waste away. Public baths were not only places of relaxation, but also of hygiene, where citizens cleansed their bodies in warm and cold pools. Fountains in city squares provided fresh water, accessible to rich and poor alike. Such measures protected communities from disease, and reflected a belief that health was both personal and collective. Roman physicians relied heavily on diet as a form of medicine. Food was not merely sustenance, but a tool for healing. A patient might be advised to eat barley gruel for strength, figs for digestion, or garlic for vitality. Honey, prized for its sweetness and preservative powers, was also used to dress wounds. Wine, diluted with water, served not only as refreshment, but as an antiseptic and a carrier for herbal remedies. In this way, the daily act of eating was intertwined with the pursuit of health. Herbal medicine held a special place in Roman practice. The countryside provided an abundance of plants, believed to carry healing powers. Chamomile soothed stomach troubles, willow bark eased pain, and mint refreshed the breath and calmed digestion. Physicians recorded these remedies in scrolls, ensuring their preservation for generations. Gardens, both private and public, often contained medicinal herbs, a living pharmacy at hand. Surgery in Rome, though limited, could be daring. Surgeons performed amputations, removed cataracts, and treated wounds with surprising skill. They understood the importance of cleanliness, often washing hands and instruments in wine before operating. Pain relief was rudimentary. Opium and mandrake might dull suffering, but the patient often endured with courage, supported by the discipline that Roman culture admired. Though outcomes varied, the very attempt at surgical care reveals the Romans' practical approach to the challenges of health. Midwives, too, carried vital knowledge. Childbirth was perilous in the ancient world, and women relied on skilled attendants to guide them through it. Midwives used herbal infusions, massage, and long experience to ease labor. Their wisdom, though rarely recorded in scrolls, was passed through generations, ensuring the continuity of life. In this way, medicine was not only a science, but also an art of compassion and tradition. Illnesses that defied treatment were often met with prayers and rituals. The Romans, deeply religious, believed that health was connected to the favor of the gods. Temples to Asclepius, the god of healing, welcomed the sick, who slept in sacred chambers hoping for dreams that would guide their recovery. Offerings of clay models representing afflicted body parts were left at shrines. tokens of hope for divine assistance. For the Romans, medicine and religion walked side by side, blending the tangible and the spiritual. Yet the most soothing legacy of Roman medicine may not lie in scalpels or herbs, but in the rhythms of care they cultivated. Imagine stepping into a Roman bathhouse, the air filled with steam and the sound of flowing water. Citizens move slowly through warm rooms, their bodies cleansed, their minds relaxed. Afterward, they sit in shaded courtyards, sipping diluted wine, speaking softly of family and fortune. Health here is not an isolated act, but a communal ritual, a way of binding body and spirit in harmony. The Roman belief in balance extended to exercise. Gentle movement, walking, swimming, or practicing with light weights were encouraged to keep the body strong. Gladiators and athletes demonstrated the heights of physical conditioning, but even the ordinary citizen was urged to maintain fitness. For Romans, a healthy body was not separate from a healthy mind. Both supported the life of duty and purpose expected of them. Despite their advances, Roman medicine had limits. They did not understand germs or the true causes of many diseases. Epidemics sometimes swept through cities, taking thousands of lives despite their efforts. Yet even in these moments, their emphasis on cleanliness, order, and care mitigated suffering and pointed toward the principles that modern medicine would one day refine. As evening falls over Rome, picture a physician writing by lamplight, recording observations from the day's patients. He notes the improvement of one man after a change of diet, the slow recovery of another through rest and herbal remedies. Outside, water still flows through aqueducts, baths still hum with quiet activity, and families still share meals prepared with health in mind. In the quiet of the night, the work of Roman medicine continues, steady, humble, and devoted to the well-being of the community. The story of Roman medicine and health is not one of perfection but of dedication. Through observation, innovation, and compassion, they sought to preserve life in an often harsh world. Their practices remind us that medicine is not only about curing disease, but also about nurturing balance, cleanliness, and peace of mind. In this, the Romans left a legacy as enduring as their roads and aqueducts, a vision of health woven into the very fabric of daily life. The greatness of Rome rested not only on laws, temples, and trade, but on the strength of her legions. The Roman military was the shield of the city, the spear of its expansion, and the discipline that bound together its vast territories. To understand Rome is to understand her soldiers, ordinary men shaped into extraordinary forces through training, order, and loyalty. A Roman legion was a marvel of organization. At its height, a single legion numbered around 5,000 men, divided into cohorts and centuries, each with its officers, standards, and duties. The centurion, easily recognized by his crested helmet and vine staff, commanded respect through both discipline and example. He was not merely a figure of authority, but a hardened veteran, expected to stand at the front lines to inspire courage by his presence. The soldiers under him, though often drawn from humble origins, carried with them the pride of belonging to the most formidable army of the ancient world. Training was the heart of Roman strength. Recruits drilled daily with wooden swords and heavy shields, far heavier than the weapons they would one day wield in battle. They marched long distances with full packs, learning to endure without complaint. They built camps each evening, digging ditches, raising palisades, and setting watch. Such repetition forged not only skill but also discipline, a discipline that made Roman soldiers reliable, even in the most desperate moments. To fight in a legion was to become part of a living machine, each man a cog in a greater design. Weapons and armor reflected this balance of practicality and power. The short sword, or gladius, was designed for stabbing in close combat, deadly in the tight formations of the legion. The pilum, a heavy javelin, was thrown to disrupt enemy shields before the clash of swords. The scutum, a broad curved shield, protected the soldier's body and allowed him to lock into formation with his comrades. Armor of iron or bronze, helmets with cheek guards, and sandals reinforced with hobnails completed the kit. Though not ornate, these tools of war were crafted for efficiency, enabling Rome's armies to endure and prevail. Defense was not only about battle, but also about preparation. Roman camps were masterpieces of order. No matter where the army marched, each camp was laid out in the same pattern, with straight streets, designated areas for officers, soldiers, and supplies. Ditches and ramparts protected the perimeter, making the camp itself a fortress. Even temporary encampments carried the stamp of Roman order, a symbol of their ability to bring structure into any land they entered. Along the empire's borders, permanent fortifications rose. The most famous of these is Hadrian's Wall in Britain, stretching across the island to mark Rome's northern limit. Soldiers stationed there watched the wild lands beyond, guarding against raids and ensuring the security of provinces within. Across Europe, North Africa, and the East, forts, watchtowers, and walls stood as silent guardians, reminding both Romans and outsiders of the empire's presence. The discipline of the Roman soldier extended beyond war. Legions often acted as builders, constructing roads, bridges, and aqueducts. Their hands raised fortresses and repaired cities, leaving behind the bones of empire wherever they marched. This dual role, warriors and builders, made them indispensable not only to conquest, but to the maintenance of Roman life. When a road stretched straight across a rugged countryside, it often bore the work of legionary labor. The strategy of Rome was one of patience and adaptability. They did not rely solely on brute force but on careful planning. Generals studied terrain, supply lines, and enemy weaknesses. They favored formation over chaos, discipline over fury. Famous tactics such as the testudo, or tortoise formation, where shields locked above and around soldiers, turned vulnerable men into a moving fortress. Even in defeat, Roman armies often recovered, reorganized, and returned stronger than before. Their resilience was as much a weapon as their steel. Yet behind every legion was loyalty, to Rome, to comrades, and to the standards they carried. The eagle standard of a legion was sacred, guarded at all costs. To lose it in battle was a dishonor greater than death. Soldiers swore oaths not only to serve but to obey, binding themselves to the state and to one another. This sense of unity created an army not of individuals, but of a collective will, marching as one. Life as a soldier was harsh, but it brought rewards. Pay, though modest, offered security. Campaigns promised loot and land upon retirement. Veterans often settled in colonies, spreading Roman culture and order to distant provinces. Thus, the military was both sword and seed, conquering new lands and planting the roots of Roman society within them. The navy, though less celebrated than the legions, also played a crucial role. Roman ships patrolled the Mediterranean, protecting trade routes from pirates and securing the flow of grain, oil, and goods into the heart of the empire. In wars, they carried legions across seas, turning the Mediterranean into what the Romans proudly called Mare Nostrum, our sea. Together, land and sea forces ensured that Rome remained connected and defended. But the military was not without strain. Wars were costly, and borders stretched thin. Over time, the reliance on non-Roman recruits grew, and loyalty sometimes faltered. Yet for centuries, the discipline and order of the legions remained unmatched, a force that both protected and expanded the empire. As evening settles over a Roman camp, one can picture the steady rhythm of life within. Soldiers gather around fires, mending equipment, sharing meals, telling stories of home and past battles. Sentries pace the ramparts, eyes sharp against the dark. Beyond the walls, the quiet of the land stretches out, but within, the order of Rome holds firm. Tomorrow may bring a march, a skirmish, or the laying of a new road. But tonight, the legion rests, a living embodiment of Rome's strength. The story of Roman military and defense is one of discipline and unity, of preparation and resilience. It is the tale of ordinary men forged into an extraordinary force, whose presence secured an empire that endured for centuries. In their shields and swords, in their camps and walls, the soldiers of Rome left behind not only victories, but also a legacy of order and endurance that echoes even now. The grandeur of Rome was not built on swords alone. Beneath the empire's power lay an unshakable foundation of ingenuity. The Romans were master builders and engineers, transforming landscapes with roads, aqueducts, bridges, and monuments that endure across centuries. Their genius was not simply in invention, but in refinement, taking ideas from others, perfecting them, and applying them on a scale the world had never seen. To walk through a Roman city, whether in the bustling heart of Rome or in a distant province, was to witness this engineering brilliance woven into every part of life. The roads of Rome were among its most enduring achievements. All roads lead to Rome, people once said, and indeed, the empire was bound together by a vast network of stone, paved highways stretching thousands of miles. Straight and true, these roads cut across mountains, forests, and plains, carrying soldiers, merchants, and messages with remarkable speed. Built layer upon layer, gravel, sand, and stone, they endured centuries of wear. Alongside them stood milestones, marking distances and reminding travelers of the order and authority that bound the empire together. For the weary, these roads were more than paths, they were lifelines, stitching provinces to the heart of Rome. Even more remarkable was Rome's mastery of water. The aqueducts, with their graceful arches spanning valleys, carried fresh water from distant springs into cities and towns. Some ran for dozens of miles, their gentle slopes calculated with precision so fine that water flowed effortlessly. These aqueducts supplied public baths, fountains, and households, raising the standard of health and comfort far above what most ancient societies could imagine. In Rome itself, the abundance of water astonished visitors, an endless flow sustaining a population of more than 1 million. Bridges and harbors extended this reach further still. Roman engineers built sturdy stone bridges across swift rivers, anchoring them with piers shaped to deflect currents. In harbors, they invented concrete that hardened underwater, creating docks and breakwaters that sheltered fleets and encouraged trade. The secret of their concrete, a mixture of volcanic ash, lime, and stone, proved so durable that many Roman structures stand to this day, outlasting empires and kingdoms that rose and fell after Rome itself faded. Public buildings reflected this mastery. The Colosseum, vast and enduring, remains the most famous, its arches rising tier upon tier to seat tens of thousands. Yet it was not only its scale that astonished, but the ingenuity behind it. Retractable awnings to shield spectators from the sun, underground chambers for gladiators and beasts, and entrances designed so crowds could enter and exit with surprising ease. The Pantheon, with its immense dome and oculus, remains one of the greatest marvels of architecture. Its proportions so perfect, and its concrete roof so enduring that it still inspires wonder. Beneath its serene harmony lay a boldness of design unmatched in the ancient world. But Roman engineering was not only for spectacle. It was woven into daily life. Public baths, supplied by aqueducts, became centers of hygiene, leisure, and community. Heating systems called hypercausts warmed rooms by circulating hot air beneath raised floors, a luxury that brought comfort even in colder provinces. Apartment blocks, though often crowded, were designed with shared courtyards, stairways, and access to water. Markets bustled under roofed halls. Forums offered open space for business and law, and amphitheaters echoed with laughter and cheers. Everywhere one turned, the hand of Roman innovation was visible. One of the most significant contributions of Roman engineering was urban planning. Cities across the empire were laid out in grids, with straight streets, central squares, and defined districts. This order extended Roman identity far beyond the capital, giving distant provinces a sense of belonging. A Roman city, whether in Gaul, North Africa, or the Middle East, carried the same recognizable features. Forums, baths, theaters, temples, each a reflection of the empire's uniformity and strength. In agriculture, too, engineering played its role. Irrigation channels carried water to dry lands, mills ground grain more efficiently, and presses extracted oil and wine. These technologies increased productivity, ensuring that the growing empire could feed its people. Combined with the roads and harbors, these innovations turned Rome into a hub of abundance, where goods from every corner of the empire flowed with remarkable ease. Even defense bore the marks of ingenuity. Fortifications, walls, and watchtowers were carefully designed to withstand siege and weather. Siege engines, ballistae, catapults, and battering rams demonstrated not only force but precision. Yet beyond the tools of war, it was the careful organization of camps and supply lines, the logistical genius of moving armies swiftly across vast distances, that revealed Rome's engineering mind. What made Roman innovation so remarkable was its balance between grandeur and practicality. A bridge might serve an army, but it also served a farmer bringing goods to market. An aqueduct sustained not only a bathhouse, but also humble kitchens and gardens. A road carried not only legions but also pilgrims, traders, and families. Engineering was not an isolated pursuit of luxury. It was the foundation of daily life, the quiet rhythm that made the empire function. And yet these marvels also carried a spiritual weight. To walk beneath the arches of an aqueduct, or to stand in the vastness of the Colosseum, was to feel the presence of Rome itself, its might and permanence embodied in stone. Each structure whispered of ambition, of order, and of the belief that Rome was destined to endure. Even centuries later, as ruins, these structures retain their power. Reminders of a civilization that believed in building, not only for the present but for eternity. As night falls over a Roman city, imagine the lights flickering in homes, warmed by hypocausts, the fountains bubbling with water, carried across miles, the roads stretching into the darkness toward distant provinces. The people sleep under roofs supported by arches, secure behind walls raised with stone, surrounded by the hum of a civilization woven together by innovation. In these quiet hours, the genius of Roman engineering rests, not in silence, but in the steady pulse of life it sustains. The story of Roman engineering and innovation is one of vision and endurance. It is the story of a people who built with such care and skill that their works outlasted their empire. Roads that still guide travelers, aqueducts that still carry water, buildings that still inspire awe. These are Rome's greatest victories, not won with swords but with stone. In their arches, domes, and streets lies the most enduring legacy of all, the belief that human hands, guided by order and imagination, can shape the world to endure beyond time itself.